Gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Speaker of the London Borough of Hackney.
Home. This is far better than Channel 4, I assure you. We continue to run these meetings in a COVID-safe way. Those watching live stream will see councillors have been spaced in accordance with social distancing guidance. Although face coverings are no longer a legal requirement, we're continuing with our practice, requesting councillors wear them around the building. Councillors are not required to wear a face covering when seated, although they may choose to do so for their own personal comfort. Likewise, there may be a number of reasons why councillors are unable to wear face coverings, and we respect their personal choice. For those councillors accessing this meeting remotely, a reminder, you are not counted as being present for the purposes of the Local Government Act 1972. You may not vote on any item under consideration. Before we move to formal agenda, as you'll be aware, Rule 25.1 of Council Procedure requires that full council, all councillors must stand and address the meeting. Can we have a motion that that's not necessary? Can we have that moved? Yes, Councillor Chapman, is that seconded? It's essentially a tradition and it's within the standing orders that councillors have to stand up. But we're saying because of COVID that it's not necessary. So can that be seconded by someone? Okay, Councillor Steinberg is fine. All right, is that agreed? Can I ask what councillors and officers introducing reports, please be succinct, lucid and to the point, as I always am. Apologies for absence. See from councillors Chowan, Conway, Garcia, Levi and Race. And I think Councillor Pallas has apologised for lateness and Councillor Selman's apologised for lateness. I understand Councillors Adams, Adajari, Pluvier, Renison and Mount are joining the meeting remotely, and I welcome them. Is anyone else joining the meeting remotely? Yes? Who are the others, can you see? Councillor Conway, Councillor Gregory, and Councillor Sizer. Thank you. Councillor who? Yeah, Councillor Maymer will be joining us late. Councillor Steinberger? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apologies for lateness from Councillor Lisser.
Speaker's announcements. This is a very bittersweet time for us to hold this meeting. It's the final meeting of this municipal term at a time when the world's history has changed in a way none of us perhaps expected. Most of us grew up with one way of thinking, but we're being challenged and a bloody war is raging on our continent. It's great here that we're in this chamber representing a pluralistic democracy, settling differences of opinion amicably or fairly amicably, respecting legitimate differences, glorifying in the diversity of culture, background, ethnicity, religion, and sexuality here. And here we are in one of the most diverse parts of Europe. I'll say a few things about what the Speaker's Office is doing in the current situation shortly, and Mayor Glanville will also update us on the Council's action after I've finished speaking. Sometimes at a final meeting like this, members can be, let's say, a little demob happy, but in the current circumstances, please exercise restraint and show the dignified level of debate we're accustomed to. Furthermore, during the forthcoming election campaign, as all parties have previously agreed, please avoid personal attacks, whether on the doorstep or social media. And of course, there should never be any racism, misogyny, homophobia, or any abuse of any kind. We'll be saying goodbye to a number of distinguished members tonight. The Mayor will say more on that later. Some, of course, may be leaving not necessarily of choice, but that's a matter for the electorate to decide. But I'd like, for those who know that they are leaving, to thank you for your distinguished public service, commitment, and usually good humour. Sadly, during this council term, we lost a former councillor and speaker, Jeff Taylor, a councillor for 16 years. A special award category in the Mayor's Music Awards has been named after him, as has a block on the Frampton Park estate. Jeff was a talented musician and a brilliant orator whose wise words filled this chamber with eloquence and common sense. We have a lot to live up to. I've been working with Initiatives of Change in Brunel University on an intergenerational project here in Hackney, in which teenagers and pensioners can share their experiences and see what they have in common. That's something that's positive and should be interesting. I've also visited the Tomlinson Centre, which is in Queensbridge Road, to present School Crossing Patrol Awards. During the pandemic, the centre didn't close up shop. What it did was to prepare and serve over 90,000 fresh meals to homeless people, a quite remarkable effort and achievement. So let's give them a round of applause. I also paid a civic visit to Kids Mania, a children's centre experiencing some difficulties with their freeholder, and was impressed by the excellent work they do. In the next few weeks, now most restrictions have been lifted, I'll be visiting Hackney Archives, the Dalston Curve, Our Ladies Convent High School and Lubavitch School. A number of civic events are coming up. We're having a fundraising dinner at the Beauvoir Block on the 31st of March, which is actually almost sold out. I think there's 2 tickets left. And we're staging our annual quiz in the Assembly Rooms on the 7th of April with the indefatigable Sean Wallace as quizmaster. I'll also be arranging an additional event due to the current situation. I'm hosting a reception for Ukraine, 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 15th of March, and you're all welcome to attend. It's somewhat ironic. I hosted a Ukrainian reception in 2014 when I was last speaker following the annexation of Crimea. Many Ukrainians from Hackney and surrounds came, and they'll be invited again. We've also invited the Ukrainian ambassador. I'm working with Urswick School on a Paintings for Peace project and will collect artwork from talented pupils next Friday. And they'll be photographed and sent to Sergei Cheremin, International Secretary of Moscow City Council. We all have our own worries and concerns, irritations, frustrations. Sorry, I think that's just the acoustics. There we are, I was just talking about irritations and concerns. We all have our own worries, concerns, frustrations, occasionally pain and suffering. But this time, though, we must think of the people of Ukraine and what they are going through. I know the country very well, having carried out outreach in the Jewish community there for several years from 2009, and I even spent 2 New Year's Eves there in 2018 and 2019 in Kharkov, which is now being bombed. When we went for these New Year's Eves, we had the same table with much the same people, a mother and a daughter, a student, an IT guy, decent, peace-loving people. My friend from Kharkiv, Alina Olhavaya, was staying with me over Christmas and January and had to return when her visa expired at the end of January. She attended the flower laying on Holocaust Memorial Day. She replied to a message from my sister a few days ago as follows: "It is a horror here, but we are still hoping and praying. We can't do much to address this unfolding calamity, but we will do what we can. I hope that everyone else is okay. Love to all." I also became friendly with Rabbi Ehrentreu from Zaporozhye, who's a member of Chabad, who have world centers here in Stamford Hill and in New York, and made many friends in Odessa, the Pearl of the Black Sea. At a dire time for Ukraine, I'd like us to stand for a minute's silence out of respect to victims and those affected. Thank you. Mayor Glanville will now speak on the Ukraine issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and just to echo your words about former Councillor Taylor, I really do look forward to on Monday seeing the Mayor's Music Awards return, and obviously those inclusive awards that we have named in his honour. I also thank you, Mr. Speaker, as well as the Monitoring Officer, for giving up a small portion of this meeting to address Ukraine. Famously, Mr. Speaker, my predecessor and I have always referenced that Hackney Council doesn't have a foreign policy, but that has never meant, as a council for an internationalist borough shaped by communities from across the world, that we didn't care, nor that we were immune to events across the world. Over the past few years, we have gathered here in the aftermath of natural disasters, terrorist attacks, always offering our solidarity in the face of destruction and loss of life. Part of a borough that always offers a hand of friendship and rallies to help. We've also proudly stood with refugees and migrants, whether in the bridging hotels in the borough, the Calais camps, fleeing the civil war in Syria, repression in Hong Kong, or most recently the fall of Kabul. And as last month, we marked the first family being resettled in Hackney. Tonight, Mr. Speaker, is no different, but this is no natural disaster. It's a calculating act of brutality created by Putin based on so many lies and false premises that it would be unworthy to repeat them here. A week ago, the people of Ukraine went to bed at peace, but in the early hours of Thursday morning, that ordinary life of peace was shattered by what is now an increasingly brutal attack by Russia, still underway tonight. And indeed, as you referenced and echoed, Mr. Speaker, if we were in Kiev or a town or city council in central, eastern or southern Ukraine, it's highly likely, given the building we're gathered in, that our civic administration would be being targeted, or we would be in a bunker or worse. No doubt later we'll be talking about our plans for the future, a budget of schools, playgrounds, homes, and futures we're investing in. But we're also, day by day, watching the very same schools, playgrounds, and homes and futures only a few thousand miles away being destroyed day after day. I think that, Mr. Speaker, is why the conflict hits us so hard and why active solidarity matters. Think also of the young men that Putin has sent to fight and die for him, men that were undersupplied, barely adults, and are now whole battalions from geographical areas from across Russia being wiped out. This isn't about NATO or the EU, it's about freedom and civilian lives that shouldn't be sacrificed for the delusions of greatness, spheres of influence, or aggression created by Putin and his criminal bandit regime. I would like to take the opportunity to highlight tonight, Mr. Speaker, that our two atria have been lit blue and yellow in the colours of the Ukrainian flag this evening. This is only a small symbol of our solidarity, but we sit alongside Parliament, other boroughs, the Mayor of London, standing with the people of Ukraine, but also London's Russian and Ukrainian communities and those with connections and families here in Hackney who are of Ukrainian descent. I know they're represented in this chamber and probably watching from afar. It's been incredibly distressing to watch the images of violence and the images of people fleeing their lives. As a country and borough, we must do more to ensure that we help, whether that is sending resources or taking in refugees. Hackney has always and will continue to be a borough of sanctuary for all. We have been shaped and built by migrants fleeing very similar circumstances to those that we see in Ukraine today. And I think they most vividly understand what Ukrainians are going through. Whether it's from Afghanistan, Syria, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Ukraine, Kurdistan, they have made their homes in Hackney, and we believe in their fundamental right to sanctuary and safety. At the same time, though, we've seen the very worst of humanity, and in those distressing reports of Black and Asian residents and students and migrants within Ukraine who have struggled to cross EU borders and into safety. And I think it is a very visible example of the multicultural Ukraine being destroyed, and that is also represented by the attack on the Holocaust Memorial in Kiev. But that sharp end of the racist border policies that we've seen not just from our own government and their hostile environment, but across Eastern Europe and the world is shameful. People are trapped in a war zone and they should not pay an even greater price because of the colour of their skin, their ethnicity or religion. It is unacceptable and it is inhumane. There are also the vulnerable Ukrainians, elderly and disabled, that can't leave their homes, can't make that journey across Ukraine for safety. And we've also seen hospitals attacked. These scenes shame us all, and it is right that the Ukrainian government and the UN has called them out, that we do tonight, and that the EU and national governments, including the UK, ensure it stops now. Over the coming days, we will ensure that Hackney is working with other London boroughs to push our government to do more, and work with European countries to end their racist border policies and support everyone who is fleeing to get safety. We are always ready to do our bit. I'd like to pay a special tribute to the Salvation Army in Clapton and my colleagues who attended the vigil there last night. Councillor Ette, Councillor Root and others were there. And Hackney Civic Society has not waited to mobilise. Building on what you've already said, Mr. Speaker, we've seen people rallying on social media, talking to their friends about what they can do, from schools like Betty Laywood collecting donations to the absolutely incredible E5 Baby Bank, again in Clapton Kings Park, collecting donations and filling a lorry bound for Poland. And I thank Councillors Rathbone and Troughton for working with them. And I know that they're promising to do it again. The ribbons we're wearing tonight, Mr. Speaker, I've been making a week. And through these and other personal donations since Monday, I can say that everyone in this chamber, their friends and colleagues, some staff, and indeed Claire, who's asking a public question shortly, we've raised over £1,000 for the Red Cross appeal in 3 short days. I'd really like to thank all of us who have donated, encourage those that haven't to do so, and watch out for further opportunities to get involved in that humanitarian response. I mentioned some of the other refugee communities and the civic action in Hackney earlier. De Beauvoir Association and De Beauvoir for Refugees will be known to many of us in this chamber, and it is no surprise that they're organising a fundraising concert for Ukraine at 6 o'clock in St Peter's de Beauvoir on Saturday night. You can also look at the Ukrainian Institute in London, the Red Cross, UNHCR and UNICEF, amongst others. All of these things, I recognise, Mr. Speaker, are small acts, but they are acts that matter as we all hope for an end to this conflict and an end to this conflict that sees Ukraine independent and free.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Before we carry on, I have one other sad announcement to make. Former Councillor Jeffrey Schenker unfortunately died at the weekend. I'll arrange for the Speaker's office to send condolences to his family. Councillor Steinberger.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, did I interrupt you in the middle of? Okay. I just wanted to first obviously start with what we were speaking before about the war. It's very worrying to see what's going on. We're living in 2022.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
It's very worrying to see what's happening in Russia with Ukraine. And I was just thinking, if I just saw, for instance, in Hungary, there was a whole load of refugees who managed to run away from Ukraine to Hungary, where they actually stopped in a special center which was set up for them with beds and everything. And similar things have happened in Poland and other countries. And, you know, we're sitting here today thinking, you know, we are like, you know, just life goes on. But we have to take a look in the mirror and think what is going on here, because this is very scary. Now, I was just thinking of a few suggestions which we could perhaps do as a united Hackney. If we could write to the Ukraine embassy, for instance, to say that here in Hackney, we're very much in support of the whole, you know, of the whole situation and anything we can do to help. And I don't know exactly what these badges are, whatever you were explaining, but perhaps it would be a good idea to give out Ukrainian badges that people can wear, at least in the town hall. And I think, you know, sometimes let's be more creative than other boroughs. Let's come up with something that people should actually speak about Hackney. Look what Hackney is all about. But it is a very worrying times. And I'm just wondering if we have thought about doing anything for the Ukraine refugees. That's something else, another line to go by. So all in all, I think I can talk. I don't want to talk as the Conservatives. I want to talk as a person living in Hackney and representing many different people. I think it's very important on such a bad time we actually do whatever we can to show that we're united in Hackney, and we won't tolerate threatening other people's lives. So this is what I wanted to talk about the war. I want to now come on to Councillor Schenker, who I think, Michael, you must have known him very well, but there was this very interesting story. In the olden times, Jeffrey was going to stand in Leabridge ward for the Labour Party. And I don't know what happened. For some reason, he went into the wrong room, so he ended up in Chatham. He told me this story himself. And in Chatham, there wasn't enough candidates, so there was no contest even. And he came through as one of the 3 Labour candidates in Chatham. Now, I don't know, you know, I wasn't there at the time, so all I can think of is probably maybe another candidate from Chatham went into another room, I don't know. But this was a story that he told me, and he told me that's how he started to become a councillor. He was a councillor for quite a few years. He later on became a Liberal Democrat councillor. He went over. And for many, many years, I think even whilst he was a councillor, he wasn't well. He had heart problems. Nobody knew anything about it. He was a very active person. And I just wanted to say he would be sorely missed because, you know, the Speaker was saying they're going to send, obviously, to the family. I don't know if he has maybe a brother, but that's about it. In Stamford Hill, he was actually living by Councillor Shara's house. But I've known him for a long time. And all I want to say is it's a very sad time, and especially he passed away suddenly. So I just want to join in. Perhaps, again, we should send on a joint thing, condolence, and let's only hear good things.
Thank you very much, Councillor Steinberger, and we'll include all members in our condolences. We might send them to Ian Shearer. We now, well, firstly, I would say at the last meeting we had an extremely full agenda and we had to rush things a little. It doesn't mean that you can go on and on and on, as a former politician once said she might, but it does mean we'll try and take this final meeting at a slightly more relaxed pace, but do try to be concise and to the point in what you say. Now, item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No? Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree the minutes is a true and accurate record? Councillor Steinberger. Right, thank you for that. Item 5, questions from members of the public. Now, there are a lot of questions tonight. Unfortunately, we can only allow 30 minutes for this. We'll see how we get along. The first question is from Grace Adebayo to Deputy Mayor Nicholson. Is Grace here or on screen?
Yes, I'm on screen.
Okay, Grace, would you like to give us your question, please?
Thank you so much, my honorable. The first question, as I have used Ridley Road market for over 40 years, so I was proud to hear that the market actually received the national award for the best large outdoor market 2022. Can the cabinet member tell me what he is going to do to make sure that that the market stays the best for the next 40 years?
Thank you, Grace. Deputy Mayor Nicholson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Grace. Good evening, and thank you for your question this evening about Ridley Road, and indeed your long history, 40 years worth of history with Ridley Road Street Market. Just as a little bit of context, Mr. Speaker, which just might help colleagues in the chamber and indeed those listening to us online. Grace is referring to Ridley Road Street Market. There is in excess of 100 market traders who are actually trading from pre-pandemic. Ridley Road was attracting over 4 million customers per annum. A considerable number of people, and over the course of the pandemic, it was the only 6-day fruit and vegetable market in full operation throughout all of the lockdowns, managed in a safe way for customers and traders alike, and providing much needed produce and goods for households in the borough. To give you another kind of fact in regards to Ridley Road Street Market, and particularly the traders themselves, every single one of them, Mr. Speaker, is linked and signed up to the Alexander Rose charity. And I think I have said in the chamber on a previous occasion, and it should be sort of absolutely repeated again this evening, Mr. Speaker, that over £40,000 worth of free fruit and vegetables were traded to local residents who, on the back of the Alexander Rose vouchers, an extraordinary achievement, and the only market in London that can actually lay claim to such credit. One other thing, we're looking to the future, as the Mayor has said in one of the items later on this evening on the agenda. Looking to the future, Ridley Road Street Market is now running at an impressive 87% recycling rate of all of the materials left over at the end of the day. That is a real achievement. It is the highest recycling rate of any street market in the capital. And its objective is to hit 100% of all waste being recycled over the coming 12 months. There is a new regime coming into play around the banning of single-use plastics in the market. This is an extraordinary achievement and shouldn't be underestimated. But as Grace also touched on upon, Mr. Speaker, the really fantastic achievement is that Ridley Road Street Market has been voted the best large outdoor street market in the United Kingdom. That is an extraordinary achievement. Absolutely. Absolutely. All credit, Mr. Speaker, must go to the traders of Ridley Road Street Market. And I'd like to place on record thanks to Councillor Peter Snell, Mr. Speaker, who has been there championing the traders, who has been there leading on that engagement, helping them to bring about the most extraordinary accolade that has happened. The other thing, just to add, Mr. Speaker, that actually Hackney was nominated for 3 awards at these national awards. The best food market, Broadway Market, the best community market, Chatsworth Road Market, were also shortlisted. Unfortunately, they didn't quite make the award, but they were on the shortlist. And the real accolade goes, Mr. Speaker, to Ridley Road itself. It is the first time that any street market in London has ever won such an award. And all credit to the market service in the council, all credit to the traders. And I think, Councillor Snell, you can take a little bit of a credit for this achievement as well. Congratulations to all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, that's very positive. Grace, you have an opportunity, if you so wish, to give a supplementary question. It has to arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Do you want to ask another question?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you so much for your answer and a fantastic achievement. But I want to be sure that the council is committed to investing into Ridley Road Market and the traders that serve my family and the community for the next 40 years.
Thank you, Grace. Deputy Mayor Nicholson, could you address that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Grace, for bringing me back down to earth, having got rather carried away with Ridley Road Street Market's achievement of winning the equivalent of the Oscars Best Film Award. I'm sorry about that, but thank you. So what is it that we are doing, Mr. Speaker? What is it that we have planned to support Ridley Road Market going forward? Can I just perhaps start by saying 4 years on, from the beginning of the Dalston conversation, where thousands of local Dalston residents have responded and told us what they would like to see brought forward in Dalston and Dalston Town Centre. Not unsurprisingly, Mr. Speaker, not unsurprisingly, Grace, residents saw Ridley Road Street Market as being top of that list. We are already delivering on a £1 million investment into Ridley Road Street Market to enhance the street, to bring forward new facilities for market traders, so that's new market stalls, for example. We are also bringing forward a free public access Wi-Fi initiative along Ridley Road. All of this is targeted at ensuring and consolidating the future of Ridley Road Market. But we're not stopping there. I announced last month, Mr. Speaker, that one of the pieces of the jigsaw landed in regards to Ridley Road and its future, Grace, and that was the council's acquisition of a lease in the Hackney Shopping Village, the building that's known as the indoor market for Ridley Road. This was a building, and indeed is still a building, that is not actually owned by the council, but the council intervened. It took over the ground floor and the basement and first floor areas of this building to ensure and bring forward fit-for-purpose new storage for the market traders, alongside a new market office hub for Ridley Road, new facilities for the traders, and also new trading spaces in the indoor market. This is a real step forward, and Grace, if I may say, it sort of presents an absolute commitment to the future of Ridley Road Market, and this council is set to reinforce that commitment for the next 4 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The next question is, and thank you, Grace.
Thank
an
you.
interesting and good question. The next question is from Temi Abiodun to the Mayoral Advisor on Private Housing and Housing Affordability. Temi, are you here? No, Temi. Okay, that will be answered in writing. The next question is from Claire Battaglino, and this is to the Cabinet Member for Energy, Waste, Transport and Public Realm. Claire, are you here? Okay, we'll just go and get Claire. And if Temi does materialise, we will enable her to ask her question, otherwise there'll be a written reply.
Hello.
Hello, is that Temi?
Yes, it is. Sorry.
Temi,
I had
sorry,
problems
we couldn't hear you. Well, it's all right, we can wait for Claire for the next one. Temi, could you ask your question, please?
Absolutely. My question is for, one moment, please. I would be grateful if the Mayoral Advisor for Homelessness, Housing Needs and Rough Sleeping could outline the plans to support young adults in Hackney concerning housing. So I would be particularly interested in hearing the plans for people like me who have a job, who live in Hackney, who do not need emergency accommodation, but also can afford to actually rent houses in Hackney as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Temi. Councillor Mima, could you answer that, please?
Thank you for your question, Temi. And just for clarity, I'll be answering as the Mayoral Advisor for the private rented sector and affordability. But your question is really important as it cuts across so many areas. So as you know, and as you've highlighted, Hackney is in the middle of a housing crisis, and this lack of housing, of affordable housing in the borough is having a profound impact on our residents. And the factors that contribute to this include the ongoing impact of right to buy, which removes social homes from circulation, fewer households moving out of social tenancies to free up those homes, which historically was the case with more supply, woefully inadequate levels of grant funding from the government to support the building of truly affordable council homes, and woefully inadequate levels of support and funding from the government for priorities like fire safety and net zero homes, meaning that organisations and councils like ours are having to use resources which could be better spent increasing housing supply, instead dealing on these matters, which are really important, but obviously have an impact for people like you. So we have committed for a number of years to investing in doing everything we can in our power to provide effective and genuine housing guidance to residents in the borough who do not qualify to join the housing register. And some of these options, they obviously look across the whole council, but some of the advances that we have made include our Better Renting campaign, where we have really pushed and lobbied for longer tenancies for people in the private rented sector here in our borough. We've made some progress around that in the last few years with some housing association colleagues. And I thought as well, Mr. Speaker, to mention our housing company, where we have started a proof of concept where we are able as a council to build homes for private rent, which are let to people in Temi's position who want to live here. It's their home after all, but cannot afford to buy, and also, as I've said already, don't qualify for social housing. So again, those 3-year tenancies and those rent controls are really important, and we continue to push for those rent controls with the Secretary of State, who is much more open to these things than his predecessors. And so as well, alongside all of that, though, those reforms to our private rented sector, which houses 36,000 households, and despite that lack of government funding and things like Brexit and the coronavirus pandemic, we're delivering one of the most ambitious programmes on house building in the country. And I'm sure the Mayor will talk about how we're set to start or complete more than 1,500 new homes between May 2018 and this May 2022. And more than half of those homes we build will be or are genuinely affordable to local people. And I should say as well, Temi, we are committed to, for example, housing options including shared ownership that work for Hackney people on Hackney incomes, and really encourage you to look at the work that we're doing there. But really underpinning all of this is homes for social rent, and they should be available to everybody who needs them, whether young or old. And just want to reiterate that commitment that we will always put traditional council housing first. And so that shared ownership offer that I told you about, we've got really great examples at Bridge House again, and our award-winning Frampton Park infill estate there in Victoria Park. And so one of the other things I want to talk about, Mr. Speaker, is our Hackney Living Rent homes, which are aimed at people like you. Those rents will be capped at 1/3 of local incomes by ward. We have schemes launching at Gooch House in my own ward of Hackney Downs in Clapton, and we are also delivering those at Bridge House. And these homes can make a difference to those who do live in them, but we know that they can't solve the housing crisis alone, and that people of all ages, whether young people like you wanting to establish a family or a household, or people facing retirement and concerned about their approaching a fixed income and rising rents, all on the front line of the housing crisis. We know that alone doesn't solve it. So we are also looking to improve the supply of additional housing by developing pilot schemes for modular and related forms of housing. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we're looking at a full range of financial incentives which could really improve the supply of homes in our existing stock. For example, incentives and options for people who may be under-occupying their homes. And we will be launching a campaign to tackle empty properties in the private sector so that they're brought back into use as homes for rent for the long term. And we also I want to finish on, Mr. Speaker, the Hackney Housing Company, and that will be reviewed, and we will take a view on the future role of the company, which will include questions on how best the company can contribute to housing supply and whether and how it may need to be expanded, again, for the benefit of our residents. And for our residents who live in the private rented sector, I can only commit to a future administration expanding and maintaining the Better Renting campaign, and look to work more closely with our private landlords and those housing associations across the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Mila. Do you have a supplementary at all, Timmy?
Oh, I don't. Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive response, and you've also given me some resources that I wasn't aware of. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and nice seeing you online. Now, Claire, after that full start, Claire, could you come to the microphone? This is Claire Battaglino, and you have a question for the Cabinet Member for Energy, Waste, Transport and Public Realm. Go ahead, please.
Right, this is a bit high. Okay, before I speak, I'd just like to say that I'm wearing black today, not because I've joined the Conservative Party, but because this represents the lungs of the children who live on the sacrificial roads, who are being poisoned by the extra traffic that is on them and the pollution. So this is for Imogen's two little ones, Alex's children, Katharina's children, and Ali's children, who were all out there tonight with us, and Matt's as well, of course, on Balls Pond Road. My own children aren't living at home anymore, thank God. My question is, why has Richmond Road, a designated through route, been closed to traffic, displacing many thousands of vehicles each day onto more heavily residential roads like Dalston Lane, which has a nursery, a primary school, 2 blocks for the elderly, a library, 2 community gardens, and is a pedestrian corridor and a cyclist one between 2 transport hubs. It's a very well-used road.
Thank you, Claire. Your question will be answered by the Cabinet Member responsible, Councillor Metty Coburn. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. Start by welcoming Claire, one of my biggest fans, to the chamber. Mr. Speaker, what we have been doing in Hackney is we've been introducing 40 low traffic neighbourhoods, 19 low traffic neighbourhoods and 40 school streets since 2020, because we know that a high proportion of Hackney streets are in low traffic zones than any other borough in London. And the reason why we're doing this is because we know that more than 87% of people in Hackney either walk, cycle, or take public transport. As a centrally located borough, We know that many people drive through Hackney to get to where they need to. We're surrounded by North London, the city, East London, and of course, we know the impacts of the A12. And of course, we want to encourage people to come to Hackney to shop here, and of course, to visit and their family and friends. But we also know that Hackney has historically had a huge problem with air quality, and that we do need to protect the lungs of our children, like Claire has said. Mr. Speaker, we know that only a third of households in Hackney own a car, and we also know that more than 80% of cars in Hackney that have received a penalty charge notice are vehicles registered outside of Hackney, demonstrating the point that we have a huge issue with external traffic. We cannot keep kicking this problem down the road, and it's not acceptable that our children have to grow up with stunted lungs. And we want to encourage, of course, more people to walk, cycle, and take public transport. We know that through polling that has been published yesterday by the council, more than 26% of people in Hackney have now taken up walking and cycling, thanks to our low traffic neighbourhoods. But we also know that we need to do something about the 25% of carbon emissions that is due to road transport, and it helps us tackle the climate crisis. So what does the evidence from our LTNs and school streets tell us so far? Across Hackney Downs, London Fields, Hoxton West, and Homerton low traffic neighbourhoods, some of our biggest schemes, traffic is down inside each area, which you might expect, by 38%. But we also know that on our main roads, on average, and on our boundary, it's down by 2%. Taking that together, the few thousands of journeys of cars, that's thousands of tons less of carbon dioxide emissions avoided every year. We also know the air quality is improving too. Across 388 monitored locations in the borough, we've seen improvements at 329 of those locations. And we've also just published an air quality pollution map, which you can find on our website, which is the first of any London borough to do that. We also polled our residents about LTNs, with results showing that more people are walking and cycling, as I've said. And we want to make sure that every single Hackney resident benefits from our low traffic neighbourhood schemes. And what we do know that is that between 40 to 50% of households in our LTNs live in social housing. But there's much more work to do. 40% of the traffic in our borough doesn't start or end here. And the number of journeys on our road was increasing steadily in the 5 years up to the pandemic. This cannot be allowed to happen again. We've seen what our neighbourhoods can look like. More specifically, on Richmond Road, residents have been raising issues and problems with the levels of traffic on Richmond Road for a number of years. The council had begun working with residents to resolve these issues and held 2 public meetings to discuss the problems and potential solutions. The favoured solution to these issues was to filter the street. Richmond Road is not considered to be a designated through road. It is not an A or B road and does not form part of the principal road network within the borough. The evidence shows that these schemes are working, even though there's more to do to get right. And we'll be publishing the air quality and traffic data, as well as bus data. Just recently, Mr. Speaker, I had a bus driver on Richmond Road. He actually just stopped me and wanted to thank me for the work that we're doing to make the trips for his passengers much more quicker than what it used to be before being stuck in traffic. But Mr. Speaker, let me be absolutely clear. We're not always going to get everything right. What we are committed to is to listening to our residents. And that's why we've been making a number of changes on some of our schemes that we have made permanent, both on Hoxton West and some of our other schemes, including allowing the blue badge exemption for some of our disabled residents. But let me just end by saying this, Mr. Speaker. We're very proud of the work that we've done to help rebuild a greener Hackney, which now sees Hackney leading London's Healthy Street scorecard for any other borough in London. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Claire, do you want to ask a supplementary question? Go to the podium, please. Go ahead. And it has to be based either on your original question or the answer.
Yes, it's my understanding that the, as some would say, sharp-elbowed, upper middle-class white residents of Richmond Road requested the closure of Richmond Road, and this information was given to me in an FOI request. Now, I asked for the same thing. I asked for a meeting of a similar type so we can talk about closing Dalston Lane, Graham Road, whichever roads. I haven't heard back from anybody yet. So my question is, when deciding, we've heard about A and B designations, but my understanding is that Richmond Road is designated not as an A or B road, I do understand that, but as a through road. The council knew what the impacts would be. They requested, before they closed it, or at the same time, they requested the closure of Marquand Place and Wayland Avenue, disingenuously claiming that these had a long-standing problem with rat running. That is blatantly untrue. My bedroom looks out on Wayland Avenue. A close friend of mine lives on Marquand Place. So the council knew that by closing Richmond Road, you would push the traffic onto roads where people already have worse health outcomes. Many of us live in social housing. Many of us are people of color. There is a school that is one and has always been one of the most
Claire,
deprived.
can you please put your
Okay,
question? 'Cause,
how is that justified on a letter A or B? I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coburn, could you answer that supplementary question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the claim by Claire that we haven't met with her is categorically untrue. I've met with her personally a counting number of times. I know that others in this chamber, including Deputy Mayor Bramble, Councillor Keddy and others have been lots in conversation with her, and including the Mayor himself. I'm actually meeting you with you again, Claire, on Thursday, and I know that you also submitted a question on Monday in Cabinet Questions. So to suggest that you haven't had that conversation with us is categorically untrue and is a lie to the people of Hackney. Now, as I said to you before, the Richmond Road is part of the London Fields low traffic neighbourhood, which is one of many experiments that we've done across Hackney to try to see how we can tackle toxic air pollution. Yeah.
It's a statement of fact.
I'm in charge here, Councillor Steinberger, even if we do support the same football team. Councillor Coburn, I didn't hear you use the word lie, but if you did, I'd rather you used a different form of words.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I was suggesting, Mr. Speaker, is that it is not true that the council, neither myself or others, haven't met with Claire. We have done that on many occasions, and we're continuing that conversation. Going back to Richmond Road, as I said, this is part of a trial low traffic neighbourhood, which is part of the London Fields low traffic neighbourhood. What we have been clear about, and I'm glad that Claire recognises the problem that we have with air quality in the borough, the historic problem that we have, is we need to take action. And what the council is doing is the low traffic neighbourhood schemes is one of many forms of action that we are taking to tackle toxic air pollution and to encourage active travel. And as part of that, we're going to be looking at the decision-making process specifically for London Fields, which covers Richmond Road. And yeah, we'll make that publicly available in the coming days. But as I said, Mr. Speaker, let me just be absolutely clear. The London Fields low traffic neighbourhood, as well as all the other low traffic neighbourhoods that we have been doing, by and large, have been working for Hackney residents, and our residents are benefiting from better air quality, and they're benefiting from having a much more active lifestyle by encouraging more people to walk, cycle, and take public transport.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coburn, and thank you very much, Claire, for coming to the Town Hall and putting your question. We've got time for 2 more questions, I hope. The next is from Ruth Parkinson to the Cabinet Manager, Cabinet Member, also a Manager, I'm sure, for Energy, Waste, Transport and Public Realm. Ruth, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I'll take my glasses off again. Given many more of Hackney residents are bus users than cyclists, what is the council doing to improve this mode of transport and to counter the reduction in bus services and increased peak time delays that have a disproportionate negative impact on women, people of colour and the less well off?
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Coburn, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Ruth for bringing this important question to the council. It was good to see on Monday as well, where you brought another question to Cabinet. Firstly, I'm glad that you recognise the problem that we have in Hackney, and the fact that you recognise that only a third of our households have cars in Hackney, and that majority of people in Hackney, I'm getting to the buses point, that the majority of people either walk, cycle, or take public transport in Hackney. Buses are an essential service in Hackney. Actually, Hackney has the highest mode and the highest share of bus users across all London boroughs, and has in the past benefited from a comprehensive frequent network of day and nighttime and bus services. We've always taken a stand against cuts to public transportation, because in Hackney we know that how vital it is to our residents, particularly to those people of colour, and as you said, to people from working class backgrounds, particularly who are less likely to own a car. We know that also public transport, walking and cycling, is also the greenest and most efficient forms of transport. As I said, 87% of people in Hackney either walk, cycle, or take public transport. We also know that a quarter of our residents use the bus as their main mode of transport. It's an affordable way for people to locally to get to work, shop, and to get around the borough. And 10 of Hackney's bus routes are in the top 25 busiest in London. The council has a long history of supporting bus priority for a comprehensive programme of bus priority lanes on council roads, as well as prioritising buses in the design of other road schemes. Recently, the council have extended the consultation and bus lane hours on Mare Street to improve journey time reliability on 5 routes. In the last 5 or so years, patronage levels have dropped significantly in some of inner London boroughs, and on parts of routes running through central London, demand has dropped by 12% in the 3 years. I think it's really important that we use this as an opportunity to remind Hackney residents how we've ended up in this position in the first place, thanks to the government's inability to support TfL and provide long-term funding support. Unlike most major European cities, which receive central government support, TfL is reliant on passenger fares to cover their running costs, thanks to the awful deal that Boris Johnson negotiated with the government when he was the Mayor of London. And we know that the pandemic has drastically had a huge impact on TfL's finances, with the transport network seeing a 95% drop in passengers during the pandemic. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this current government is playing politics with the lives of many people in Hackney and London by offering short-term sticking plasters rather than the long-term financial security that it needs. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, we have already communicated our concerns to TfL, including in a meeting with the Commissioner last year regarding the bus frequencies. And I know, of course, the Mayor of Hackney, in his capacity as the Chair of the Transport and Environmental Committee for London Councils, have been working across different London councils to make sure that he's lobbying the government on behalf of London councils and seek the support for TfL in order to help protect the bus service. But let us be absolutely clear, what is needed is a fair settlement from central government to TfL to ensure that bus services in Hackney, which are essential to Hackney residents, are maintained. TfL just received another short-term deal to June, and we share concern that a reduction in bus services will impact thousands of Hackney residents that rely on the services. But Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, I would welcome residents to join our call to TfL to save our buses and to send a message to the government that you can't level up Britain by levelling down London.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coburn. Ruth, do you have any supplementary?
Only that we know that TfL are between a rock and a hard place, and we know that the Tory government are playing politics with Sadiq Khan and with the Labour Party in charge. But you in this chamber represent all of us. You don't represent Sadiq Khan, you don't represent TfL. It's up to you to actually stand up for the residents of Hackney who use buses and walk more than anything else. Now,
all right, I think we're trying to fit one other question in, Ruth. I think I'll take that as a rhetorical question.
Okay, thank you.
But thanks for making your point. Thank you for coming to the town hall.
Thank you very much.
I now want to very quickly, because we're slightly out of time, but I want to fit in Elusa Goldberg. Could you ask your question to the Cabinet Member for Families, Early Years, Arts and Play? Elusa?
Hi, good evening. In Hackney, we're seeing a significant rise in demand for education, health and care plans, and still no sign of the SEND review promised by the UK government. So my question is, what is Hackney Council doing to improve opportunities and outcome for children and young people with special educational needs?
Thank you very much, Elusa. Councillor Woodley, could you answer that, please?
Thank you, Elusa. You are absolutely right. We are seeing a demand rise for education, health and care plans, and we have waited far too long for the UK government to publish the findings of the SEND review. The number of children with education, health and care plans, or EHC plans, has been increasing nationally since the inception of the Children and Families Act in 2014. And in 2014, Hackney had 1,399 children with either a statement or EHC plan. In 21, this has increased to 2,645 children or young people with EHC plans. This is an increase of 89% over 7 years. So to give national context to the increase, the number of children with EHC plans has increased across England. In 2014, 2.8% of pupils had an EHC plan, and this has increased to 3.7% in 2021. So as you can imagine, it's not only in Hackney, but across the country, the local authorities have been looking to the government for more support to better meet the needs of our children and young people with special educational needs, and also to better support their families and carers. Locally, the rise in pupils with EHC plans has increased more rapidly than national rates. In 2014, 3.4% of pupils had EHC plans, and this has increased to 4.6% in 2020-21. The National SEND Review has been for some time delayed, and in part, to be fair, that will be due to the pandemic. They have now set up, I think it was in November, a steering group of key stakeholders to ensure the completion of the review. Our current understanding is that a green paper will be developed and published for consultation by the end of this month, and we hope that that will be a genuine consultation resulting in true co-production. Much work is ongoing to ensure that pupils with special educational needs are supported well in Hackney. Resources and provisions set out in the EHC plans are just part of that picture. In addition to pupils with EHC plans, over 6,000 pupils are provided with special needs support. It's therefore extremely important that we have systems in place to support all of our children and young people with SEND, as well as those with statutory EHC plans. The largest type of provision in Hackney are mainstream schools, where we should note that 96% of pupils at such schools in Hackney are in good or outstanding provision, well above the national average. But even so, we know there is more we can do to support these settings to be far more inclusive. We are currently developing a new SEND strategy for Hackney, which is being co-produced by our SEND partnership, which includes health and social care as well as school leaders. And the 4 main priorities of this strategy are: 1, outstanding provision and services; 2, an earlier response. We know it takes too long to move our EHCP plans through the process. 3, preparing for adulthood; and 4, joining up our services. We don't want our families, our parents to be siloed as they're trying to get better support for their children and young people. These priorities will help us shape services that meet local needs. And under priority 1, we will ensure that children and young people with SEND have access to good and outstanding services and provision. Our school place strategy, led by Deputy Mayor Bramble, is a vital part of this work. And we're working really hard to create an expansion of specialist SEND places, both in our mainstream and our special schools. We're also working with the Haredi community to develop faith-based and good quality SEND places. We have increased the number of local SEND places in the past year or 2 at 2 of our special schools, and through additional resource provision at 2 of our primary schools. Really excellent new provision. And a cabinet paper was discussed just on Monday this week, outlining how we intend to increase places further. And I look forward to announcing more on that in due course. Under priority 2, earlier response, we've recently launched our graduated response for SEND, and this policy is designed to bring together the resources and provision for all pupils with SEND. We're also working with settings to ensure that the graduated response is joined up and embedded across the local area. Training for staff in schools is a really key part of this, as is communication with all our parents and families around our schools. In terms of priority 3, preparing for adulthood, we have had health funding agreed for a new 1-year post to significantly accelerate coordination and communication about the transition to adulthood. And this will enable clearer routes for children and families. And in terms of priority 4, joining up our services, we are working ever more closely together, including for particular groups of pupils. For example, a really vital working group on emotional-based school avoidance. We are really concerned for our pupils who, through some of the anxiety and mental health impacts that are exacerbated alongside their additional needs, has made it impossible for them to go to school. And we're deeply concerned about that and grateful to parents for working with us on finding productive solutions. So in summing up, we know that SEND services can be more difficult than they should be to access at times. it can be a deeply adversarial system. I want to assure you that we are absolutely committed in Hackney to improving our SEND offer, that we will be closely scrutinising the outcome of the SEND review, and that we'll be moving towards creating more places in Borough very, very soon. Thanks very much for bringing that question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woodley. Alusa, do you have any supplementary on this?
No, thank you, Councillor Woodley. Thanks for working alongside all communities to improve SEND in Hackney. Thanks for your answer.
Thank you very much. That concludes questions from members of the public. We move on to item 6, members of the council's questions. The first question is from Councillor Rebecca Renison to the Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As set out.
Thank you, Councillor Renison. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for your question, Councillor Renison. Before I go into the detail, I think all of what I say is against the backdrop of the pandemic and the 613 Hackney lives that have been lost during the pandemic. And I think we have to reflect on that as well as our overall COVID response to help our residents. I don't want to forget the contribution that Town Hall staff and Democratic Services have made during the pandemic and all of the people that have ensured we've been able to meet virtually and in the chamber safely, because we've been talking about democracy and freedom, and ultimately that is what is represented in this room, and we've been able to do so. Clearly, though, the heart of the question was how we've been responding and working on behalf of residents, and our primary focus has obviously been the crucial public health response. I'll come back to that a little later, but it is also about the economic and social impacts of the poverty caused by COVID, focused on the hardest hit, both directly and indirectly. And that has now gone on into the cost of living crisis. We've clearly learned a lot about poverty, about the shape and face of poverty in Hackney, and I think there are some real strengths in our response that will continue on into the crises to come. By the end of the first lockdown, I'll remind everybody in the chamber, the council had already been working on the humanitarian food response, over 14,000 food parcels, but we also mobilised a network of partners and volunteers to tackle food poverty for the long haul, and also ensure that culturally appropriate food was provided to various diverse communities across the borough, and also the crucial helpline in Stamford Hill. We realised that this was not going to be a short-term response, so we were ready for the further waves of the pandemic, and we were also focused on some of the challenges that summer 2020 presented in terms of food poverty and holiday hunger. We were able to harness that community partnership work, working together to maximise our collective impact, working with our schools, and I know colleagues in the chamber helped with that effort. You highlighted the work at the Tomlinson Centre. That was a crucial part of our hot food response to those that we were supporting in our Everyone In hotels and hostels. And it should not be forgotten that we have continued that approach for all at the moment, and continue to focus on reducing rough sleeping. And I pay tribute especially to Deputy Mayor Renison in her role, former Deputy Mayor Renison in her role when she was leading that charge. We also harnessed all of those hardworking volunteers and voluntary organisations, and they added to our efforts with over 5,000 hot meals and parcels being delivered on a weekly basis to our residents over the last 2 years. We used also government funding to support those that directly had to shield or self-isolate. And I was catching up with the officer team that were involved in that, and we still have an isolation offer through Here to Help running until the end of March. And obviously a lot of what we've put in place is designed to be resilient for what may still come. Councillor Nicholson, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, talked about our market service and how it kept Ridley Road going. We had our library service supplementing the community library service, and also organising online events and book groups. We had so many staff no longer doing their day job, really deployed out into all of our response services. It should never be forgotten, though, Mr. Speaker, that many of our teams at the council, whether they are in our parks, our streets, social care, clearly the public health team, continue to do their day job throughout, whether they were based in depots in the borough or working from home in our response. We also had that incredible vaccine drive and volunteer drive that continues to this day. And I want to pay particular tribute to all of our social work teams, whether in adults or children's, keeping residents safe, working with our care providers, and also ensuring that the Homerton was continued to be supported and that residents entering and leaving the Homerton were supported around discharge and hospital. We had our digital and IT teams creating all the platforms and services in response to this crisis, and obviously responding to that criminal cyber attack. The council throughout this time were lobbying on poverty, and through our lobbying and through our advocacy, we brought in nearly £6 million to Hackney that we were able to use to support this effort. That was especially deployed into that effort around children and families suffering from holiday hunger. 20,000 were supported, but we've also supported on fuel bills, temporary accommodation, and various other interventions. We did also do bulk buying of food and topping up of our food hubs to the tune of £120,000. Our private rented sector team were dealing with all of the challenges that private rented tenants face, but also ensuring that no one was evicted during the ban on evictions, and really advocating on people like Shacklewell Grove tenants when they were faced with intimidation by their landlords. I'd like to thank the Housing Services team as well for their efforts. But Councillor Renison, I have the honour of being your replacement as Cabinet Member for Customer Services, and I'd just like to pay tribute. I referenced it to those people working from home. It really is true that heroes wear headsets at Hackney Council. They have been at the heart of all of our responses, whether it's about paying out business rates, dealing with all the hardship calls, dealing with council tax reduction scheme and other hardship funding. And they have been doing that on rotation on top of their day jobs in our contact centres. And without them, I don't think we will be able to be as ambitious around the poverty reduction framework that is coming to Cabinet. We have been now proactively, through the Link Work team, contacting people we have identified that might be at risk of hardship, rather than waiting for them to contact us. That is a complete flip in the approach we've been able to deliver as a council. We identified 200, this is my last example because I know I'm running out of time, Mr. Speaker, but they have had a huge impact, identifying housing tenants who are over 70 and live alone and haven't booked a repair for over 2 years, and just checking in on how they are, connecting them with services, identifying 32 vulnerable people, assisting a hoarder, referencing on social care and occupational therapy, identifying somebody that was being faced with cookering, neighbours that had illegal sublets, reducing loneliness and isolation, all from that centralised team using their skills to make sure that we were servicing the most vulnerable residents. So across the board, we have been supporting our residents over the last 24 months. And I hope I've just given a small snapshot as well, Councillor Renison, of how those services are evolving into a permanent response through things like Here to Help, and as I say, our Link Work team out of our contact centres.
Thank you for that very significant snapshot. Councillor Renison, do you have a supplementary?
A very brief one, if you'll allow me, Mr. Speaker, and that's simply to ask if the Mayor will join me in thanking all those in Hackney who have helped us as a borough respond to the pandemic, from the NHS to council staff, shop workers, delivery drivers and local volunteers. The list is endless and it celebrates the very best of Hackney.
Thank you very much for that. The next question is from Councillor Gilbert Smith, the Deputy Mayor of Housing, Supply, Planning, Culture and Inclusive Economy. Councillor Smith, please.
Our libraries are one of Hackney's greatest assets, and they make a huge contribution to community well-being across all age groups, providing space for everyone to take part in a wide range of activities. Following the conclusion of the Council's Our Library survey, the Deputy Mayor please share some of the learnings from the survey, whilst reassuring residents that under this administration, Speaker, residents can look forward to libraries of tomorrow which are future-proof and meet the needs and expectations of all our users. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Deputy Mayor Nicholson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Smith. And I think a big thank you, if I may also just place on record, for your contribution and indeed a very large number of Labour councillors' contribution to the Our Libraries initiative over the kind of the latter months of the last calendar year. It was greatly appreciated, and there's been some fantastic contributions come forward from Labour councillors, which I think on its own demonstrate the commitment that the Labour administration has to libraries and indeed their future. But to get down to business and answer your question in full, over 8,500 residents, Mr. Speaker, participated in the Our Libraries public consultation campaign that was conducted over the course of the latter parts of last calendar year. It received over 7,200 responses, coming from library users as well as those actually who don't visit any of the libraries, a very broad range. There were over 52 participants in a range of focus groups that touched upon every aspect and every group within our community. And indeed, 1,200 children were reached through the Our Libraries Schools competition and participated through workshops led by Immediate Theatre, and brought forward some really, really extraordinary ideas about what the libraries of tomorrow could look like. So what is it that all of these people said? It was a long list, as you can probably imagine, Mr. Speaker, but it ranged, and actually, sorry, forgive me, I should start with the first kind of sort of compliment, actually, that came from residents, which was the quality, the professionalism, the knowledge and friendliness of those council officers who run our libraries in our borough. And it must be placed on record that there was a great deal of acknowledgement about that. But there was also real ambitions for the future of the service. It yeah, absolutely wanted improvements to the book stock, if you like, the core collection. They wanted that investment. They wanted more books in more languages and with more popular titles. They went on to talk about longer opening hours into the evening. So talking about actually being able to access libraries and library spaces 5 o'clock through to 10 o'clock in the evening. A really interesting response, led by younger residents who were calling for that extension of access hours. Improvements to and access to IT, really important, coming to the fore. Equally, small businesses, community groups, and self-employed residents were saying, no, these are really valuable spaces for us to go and do actually our work in, to use facilities, to access technology, to access networks, to do business. There was a call for more interactive cultural and arts-led activities happening, more about bringing communities together, using our libraries not just as learning spaces and spaces where you can develop skills, but also about spaces and places where people can meet, can congregate, and can participate together. Some really great ideas coming forward. There was also the call for reasonably priced cafes and bookshops to appear in our libraries. An interesting proposal, I think, Mr. Speaker. And there was also a suggestion for those more kind of sort of events that the library has a history, the service itself has a history back into the 80s, where all these rather interesting events were hosted and programmed into the life of the libraries over the course of a year. Events that brought together authors, artists, writers, bringing new individuals into the library, quite participatory workshops around things to do with books and the wider community. A great call. Our commitment, Mr. Speaker, Councillor Smith, should be seen as unequivocal. Under this administration, we have supported the libraries, we have enabled the libraries, and for the first time in many, many years, we have brought forward the beginnings of a vision for the future, led by residents, calling for a future service that can really connect with our neighbourhoods. But we are also going to commit to exactly the same thing in the next Labour administration, should the residents elect a Labour council in May of this year. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I thought you were going to say your commitment to the Speaker and Councillor Smith was unequivocal, but I'm sure it is anyway. Councillor Smith, have you got a supplementary?
By words we learn thoughts, and by thoughts we learn life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Did that come from the library? Okay, the next question is from Councillor Sarah Young to the Cabinet Advisor for Older People. Councillor Young.
Hello, does my mic work? Yes. Hello, it's been a year since we launched our Aging Well strategy. It's been a very hard year for many older people and very isolating. Can you update on what's been achieved under the strategy, including how we're helping to reduce isolation?
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Maxwell, could you respond, please?
Oh, that's it, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Councillor Young. Sorry, I can't see you behind me. Maintaining connection throughout the pandemic has been difficult for many, and for some older people, this sense of social isolation and loneliness has been a challenging reality long before the pandemic. How we tackle this is a key focus of the work of the Aging Well strategy. In the last year, the Aging Well strategy and the Hackney Older Citizens Committee that was set up have been raising the profile and voice of older people within the council in relation to co-production, importance of intergenerational dialogue, and how services need to specifically address challenges and aspirations of older people. Whether it's consulting on our parks or libraries, child-friendly places or home care, to touch on a few areas covered this year, officers have ensured that older people are part of the discussion and opportunities for the generations to come together are identified. Older people have told us the barriers they face, including digital and physical ones. They are clear that they don't just want activities exclusively for older people, they want to be part of the wider Hackney community. And of course, they tell us that they don't all like the same thing. I'm going to just highlight a few of the ways that Aging Well strategy has helped to tackle social isolation in its first year. Our Digital Buddies scheme has younger students supporting older residents to get online. There are now also drop-in sessions alongside the phone support. As well as tackling digital exclusion, this also helps build the kind of intergenerational connections both older and younger residents have told us they want. Hackney Youth Parliament, Hackney Young Futures and our Older Citizens Committee have said they want to work together, and they are planning regular intergenerational events and cross-mentoring projects. A couple of the things they are going to be talking about includes conversations about safety in Hackney, life after COVID, mental health, experiences of racism and exclusion, and they are planning an intergenerational LGBT+ event at Hackney Archives, which is an opportunity to share the different life experiences across the generations and to share their history. Throughout COVID, the resident engagement team supported older residents on our estates through the Let's Talk project. The team is now working with our over 55s groups to support community activity, focusing on what older residents feel comfortable doing as we come out of the pandemic. The culture team have relaunched Hackney Circle, a digital platform for older people to join, which enables them to find out about discounted local activity in arts and culture, getting them back out and about and into our libraries. Already referenced by Mayor Glanville, as part of our link work and early prevention project, customer services contacted people over 70+ who haven't logged a repair more than 2 years. It was felt this would be a good way to identify people who may be isolated, which it did do. And as a result, they were able to speak to older people who had become isolated during the pandemic, linking them, talking to them about wellbeing issues and signposting them to support and services. We are due to have a chatty corner pilot scheme in Shoreditch Park. These are benches designed for conversation, and they've been co-produced by the Hackney Older Citizens Committee so that they're accessible and welcoming. Making public spaces and furniture accessible and inclusive is vital for encouraging people to spend time outdoors, which in itself can counter social isolation and loneliness. As I said at the start, this is just a little bit of what we've achieved in the first year. There is going to be a summary of the achievements of the first year in the next few weeks, which is going to be published on the website. So do look out for that in your inboxes, and it will be on our website. As I say, this is just the start. It's what we've achieved in 1 year during a pandemic, and there is much more to come, and there's much more ambition. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Young? No. Thank you for your question. That was very sharp. But it shows that you appreciated Councillor Maxwell's answer. The next question is from Councillor Anna Joy Rickard.
As set out, Mr. Speaker.
To the Deputy Mayor for Housing, Supply, Planning, Culture, Inclusive Economy. Councillor Rickard.
As set out, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Rickard. A really timely question. Councillor Rickard, Councillor Moema, and indeed yourself, Mr. Speaker, as one of the dream team in Hackney Downs ward, yourself, Mr. Speaker, have been very, very, very kind of forthright and leading from the front in regards to the Nightingale project. And I know that there has been a great deal of frustration. That frustration has been felt by residents. And through your tenacity, Mr. Speaker, Councillor Rickard and Councillor Moema, you have restarted this initiative in a great way. The first phase of 70 new homes is known as Block E, next to Olympus Green, which I know that the three of you are very familiar with. And that those 70 homes are now being planned as council affordable homes to come forward as part of that first phase of the development. We have secured additional funding from the GLA, from the Greater London Authority, and Building Council Homes for Londoners programme, and that is helping considerably to deliver the 100% for social rent in this phase one. Now, over recent months, Mr. Speaker, just to reassure Councillor Rickard, Councillor Moema and yourself, is that the housing regeneration team in the council have been going out to put the first phase out to tender. Those results have just literally been returned, and it is not, I'm afraid, appropriate to discuss in open council those returns. However, progress is being made, and over the coming weeks, a full analysis and assessment will be made of those bids that have been returned to the council, which will then start to shape out the nature of the programme going forward, when it will commence, and how it will come forward. What I will kind of just sort of add, though, Mr. Speaker, is that we should not be kind of underestimating the current challenges out there in the wider economy, and in particular in the construction sector itself. And I'm sure that many in the chamber, Councillor Rickard, yourself included, are very familiar with some of these pressures that are bearing down on the country's economy and the repercussions of those pressures. There is at the moment, and I have to kind of really kind of point out that this is a combination of factors which do include Brexit, they do include the pandemic, they do include these terrible events that are playing out at the moment, as indeed, Mr. Speaker, yourself and the Mayor spoke about at the beginning of our meeting this evening. All of this is having a profound effect on the costs of building materials, the cost of skilled labour on construction sites. All of this, as we are seeing, is playing out in the country's inflation rate. Well, to be quite frank, Mr. Speaker, the cost of building materials at the moment is running at close on a 30% inflation rate as we speak, and it is showing no signs of dropping back. As I think everybody in the chamber is aware, Mr. Speaker, we have no access to government grant. Still, government refused to intervene into the genuinely affordable social housing market to bring forward those new homes. So we are up against it, and we make no bones about that. And there are going to be difficult times ahead to maintain that commendable house building programme that is council-led on council land, that Councillor Moema touched upon in her earlier response to a member of the public. However, not to leave us all on a downer here, and I think this is very important. Progress is already on the ground now. As Councillor Rickard, you are aware as one of the local councillors, Seaton Point is being brought up to current fire safety standards. There will be no passing on of cost to leaseholders for that building safety work that is going on in that particular building, and that is a great achievement. And Councillor Mackenzie, leading on the housing services side, is responsible for bringing forward a real enhancement of housing services performance on the Nightingale estate. And thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, for that input and that leadership coming from that particular aspect. Really important in building that trust and that relationship with residents. But equally, there's an investment into community facilities that's coming on the ground. That includes a renovated and redesigned green space at Olympus Green. It includes the bringing forward of a new community centre. And I think all three of you as local councillors, Mr. Speaker, are very aware of the purpose-designed temporary facility that is coming forward that will, in the later phases of the Nightingale estate regeneration, be replaced with a permanent community facility. All of this is underway and now in motion, and that is good. And just one last thing, if I may finish, Councillor Rickard, on a rather kind of sort of comforting, perhaps, sort of last point, is just to say that there is a suspicion that beneath Nightingale estate, there may be some prehistoric deposits of some prehistoric activity, human-led activity. Because of this, one of the conditions of the planning application, quite rightly too, Mr. Speaker, if I may add, is that there has to be an archaeological dig that takes place to establish whether or not any such prehistoric community may have actually established today's Nightingale estate. And it's absolutely nothing to do with the council at all. It is a community far, far older than ourselves, Councillor Rickard. But on a serious note, that archaeological dig is now being prepared and ready to land on site for that to happen. And crucially, what it is that we've asked the Hackney Museum, who have agreed to this, to come in, engage with the archaeologists, with local community groups and residents and local schools about this quite exciting kind of proposition to actually learn about the history of the Nightingale, even if we are going back a few millennia. So, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I just hope during the excavation they don't find the detritus from any parties at number 10 Downing Street. Councillor Rickard, do you have a supplementary?
No, I need to say on behalf of the Speaker and Councillor Moema, we want to thank you very much for the renewed focus and effort and resource that is going into delivering the Nightingale estate, including social cohesion as well as housing regeneration. And we welcome the inclusion of the local schools into the archaeological dig education work. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Rickard, and thank you and Councillor Moema and Councillor Desmond again for your leadership, which has been absolutely crucial and a great demonstration of local councillor leadership making change happen within the communities that we represent. Great stuff. Thank you, Councillor Rickard.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. That was all very helpful. The final question we're able to take, and we have to rush it a little bit, is from Councillor Anna Lynch to the Mayor. Councillor Lynch.
Can the Mayor please provide an update on the recovery from the cyber attack, particularly regarding the council tax system? And does the Mayor envisage any challenges to distributing the government's £150 council tax energy rebate?
Mayor Glanville, could you reply, please?
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Lynch, and really welcome back to the Chamber. I know it's been a difficult year for you and many of us as well, but really brilliant to have you here and asking this question. I'd start by saying, as I've said at Cabinet and Scrutiny Panel, and I regularly stay on the doorsteps of Hackney, restoring all of our services is my #1 priority. It's been our #1 priority since the cyber attack. It is crucial to our relationship with residents and businesses, the trust they place in us, and obviously a lot of those services serve some of our most vulnerable residents and keep them safe. None of them are discretionary, and the loss of those services through significant chunks of the last period has been really challenging for the council. All of us who were in the leadership team of the council in October 2020 will remember where they were when they found out about the cyber attack. Some of our colleagues, people that work for the council, were woken in the night and took really important action to limit the damage of that criminal attack on our systems and on the council, making sure that they could rescue some of the backups, disconnecting us from the internet, and without, I think, their actions in those early hours in October 2020, the situation would have been even worse. And I think their tireless efforts, along with support from other boroughs, the National Crime Agency, cybersecurity experts, and the government, we wouldn't be able to rebuild the systems in the way that we have. And no one can underestimate just how damaging that was. And an analogy would be, people have, someone has burgled your home and you come home to find it and it's all disrupted and you don't know how it's been disrupted. But we firmly did not leave that door open, and we have been committed to cybersecurity before, during and after the attack. We are continuing to rebuild our services. It's really complicated. It's a long process. It isn't just about restoring individual platforms or systems. It's then connecting them to the data that allow our staff to use that data to serve our residents. And that actually is the most difficult and tricky part of what many of our teams are doing. They're making good progress though with those backlogs. And while it will be several months before our services are fully back to normal in all aspects, we can deliver any transaction going forward that residents need with the council. It won't be necessarily in the traditional way, but we will obviously be able to do that. And as I opened, I'm really sorry for the impact that this has had on everyone at the council, because let's not forget, it's people answering the phones to frustrated residents and businesses and then not able to help, and they want to help, and most of all, our residents and businesses. Turning to the point of the council tax system, that is obviously one of the most critical systems that support the council. It's one of our biggest revenue sources, and we obviously were able to maintain direct debit collection in that first crucial month and since. But we also know that if anything has happened to you as a resident, whether you've moved into the borough, whether you've moved home, whether you've had people move in and out of your home, whether you've become a student, require that 25% discount, or need to interact with the benefits system, we haven't been able to update that in the normal way that we would. The promise and commitment, even in the most complex of cases, is that that process of going through the backlog will be completed by this summer, and we have been focused firmly on those most vulnerable residents in complex circumstances, as well as clearing the general backlog. I've met residents, not just in this chamber, but beyond, that have been now starting to see those bills arriving, but also, most crucially, every one of those bills is issued with a guidance leaflet around financial support and the repayment plans that might be needed. And we never want to leave a single resident, whether it's through council tax or anything else, out of pocket or at risk because of the cyber attack that befell us. The government has recently announced a £150 payment to support people who are affected by rising energy costs, and that will be processed by the council tax system and those teams that support it. It isn't going to just be, Mr. Speaker, a challenge for Hackney Council. It's a challenge for every council, because just as our business rates team had to switch from a collection service to a payout service, so will our council tax team in this case. And it's going to be around £15 million that our council tax team are going to be paying out to Band A to D residents, £150 per household. But we're also going to have to think about those vulnerable residents, and especially those, Mr. Speaker, on CTRS scheme, and that is over 1,800 households in Band E, 655 households in Band F, and 67 households in Band G. Luckily, none of the 40 plus residents in Band H are CTRS claimants, but they may have some hardships of their own. We, Mr. Speaker, really clearly set a signal in Hackney Life last month to ask residents to return trust in us and set up direct debits. Those systems were not compromised during the cyber attack. People did not lose their financial data. And it is through that direct debit process and those bank records that we will be most speedily able to pay out this £150. So my big plea to everyone watching at home, to councillors here, is continuing to encourage people to sign up for direct debits, because they're the ones that will get that £150 payment first. Sadly, though, there are 65,000 households who are not yet registered to pay by direct debit. And I also want to make sure that in the next few weeks, we restore the cashier's service so that residents are able to pay cash at the council, clear some of those arrears, but also have that conversation about getting onto direct debit so we can pay that money out quickly. It's going to be a complex scheme. It's going to be hard for Hackney. It's going to be hard for other boroughs. We're absolutely committed to getting it right. It's only a week ago that the government actually issued their guidance, and the bills go to print this week, assuming we agree the budget tonight. That's the scale of the challenge. Thank Councillor Chapman. I thank all of our finance colleagues for working to make this happen. We will do all we can to ensure that that £150 reaches our most vulnerable residents as quickly as possible, and also that we use the hardship discretionary fund with all of our other funds to target that support where it's needed the most. Thank you again for the question.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Councillor Lynch, do you have a supplementary?
No, but if I may, Mr. Speaker, can I just take this opportunity, as I think everyone in the chamber, regardless of political thing, would just like again to echo the Mayor's kind words and absolute dedication that we've seen from our senior officers. In particular, I would like to point out, I've been incredibly embarrassed, but I don't know if we're allowed to, but particularly to Rob Miller, our Strategic Director for Customer and Workplace, who had led very much with the senior leadership team on handling this cyber attack, who I understand has become a bit of a celebrity and a bit of a voice of sort of experience, unfortunately, as an outcome. But yeah, I think it's really important, because on top of COVID, it was, I couldn't imagine what it must have been like for the officers. So
thank you very much for those kind words. We now come to item 7, elected mayor statement. Mayor Glanville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just going to take a small bit of squash before I... First of all, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to highlight the recent storms that we had in the borough. They saw a number of trees and homes and businesses impacted. It wasn't easy. A resident lost their life in a neighbouring borough. But I just wanted to thank all of the hard-working council staff that worked together to triage, report and repair that damage, and do it in such a way with our residents that we had that quick response after Eunice and Franklin. And I know that there was also a big civic response to that effort across the borough. I think it's just another example of why so many parts of our council are the fourth emergency service. And I know in those crucial days just what a important response that we led, and we also prepared for much worse. And I think that was very prudent. I'm going to largely leave the politics and policy for my budget speech. And I go back to where you started, Mr. Speaker, and reflect, obviously, on the loss of former Councillor Taylor. He stepped down before the last local elections. But there were also 5 councillors through various means, some personal challenge, some promotion, some, frankly, have just had enough, who left us during this administration. So former Councillor Courier, Deputy Mayor Clark, Councillor Burke, Councillor Hilly, and Councillor Klein all stepped down in various ways, and I just pay tribute to their contribution to the council, and obviously some of them were in my cabinet and served with distinction. It's the last full council before the local elections and the new administration. We've met some of the fabulous Labour council candidates this evening, including Grace Adebayo and Elusa Goldberg. asking fantastic questions. We would have heard from Farouk and Ahmed Tinez and Ahmed Bismillah or Claudia Turbot-Dilloff. I hope they enjoy their written responses, but it just shows their commitment to activism and what incredible councillors they may make in a few weeks' time. But more sadly, that's a look to the future. Sadly, we will be this evening saying goodbye to some of our colleagues. Collectively, there is 145 years of public service leaving us this evening and won't be returning after May. So we have councillors Chauhan, Spence, Cloutier, Hanson, Sharman, Peters, Stopps, Renison, Gregory, Cameron, David, McMahon, Bell and Odds. I would just like to pay tribute to all of them and their contribution to the work of this council. And I'm just going to canter through some of my personal tributes. I'm sure others would like to join in, but as I think you said, Mr. Speaker, we'll have to do that on another occasion. I'm just really pleased that Councillor David has joined us this evening. He has represented Clissold since 2019 after a by-election where I'm sure he would tell us he had the highest personal vote of any candidate that's been elected to the council. And I think that would make him the 5th highest vote of any elected representative in the borough after our MPs, Councillor Rima and myself. He served on licensing, health in Hackney, and Vice Chair of Standards. He's been a tireless advocate and campaigner, not just as a councillor, but an activist. He's permanently been part of our anti-racist response. He cares deeply about Stoke Newington and Woodbury Down, and is a passionate, tireless and endless governor for St Mary's School. And I know that he'll continue in public service there, and I'm sure will want to rejoin us at some point in the future. And I just thank you for your service. Councillor Chauhan was elected in 2018 in Haggerston. Here he has been member of Audit, Planning, Corporate and living in Hackney. But I think we would all know him most as a Haggerston councillor and activist, probably doing more casework in that ward to the point where he stops his colleagues doing it because he's already intercepted it on email or through advice surgeries. He's a teacher by profession in a complex ward where he's navigating representing some of the largest council estates, but also housing associations and complex property ownership. He has probably done more than most in this chamber to tackle the issues of cladding, freeholder and leaseholder charges, and always holding ourselves and housing associations to account. He's also a councillor who has put Diwali and our Indian community firmly on the map, and I know ensured that our speaker and myself were able to contribute in those events, and I thank him again for his service. Councillor Spence, also representing Haggerston, member of Pensions, Audit and SEG. Again, hardworking councillor, really active in the community. Legal background that I know he always brings to debates and critical challenge. And I think we would all recognise that we know where Councillor Spence stands on many, many, many issues of note. And I again thank Councillor Spence for his service. Councillor McMahon is in the gallery. I'm sure he didn't expect to be leaving us quite so soon, but life always changes. But he was one of the incredible triumvirate that won Cazenove for Labour in 2018. And for that, he will never be forgotten. Architect by profession, a recent young family. I don't know, just life has gone in a different direction, but always passionate, always committed, real advocate for social housing and good design. And I really thank you for everything that you've done. Moving forward, or backwards actually, Councillor Cameron, first elected in 2014 in Clissold, and indeed your life has changed massively since you were first elected, and I know Silas will be immensely proud of his mum, but obviously your activism around many of the motions that have come before the Chamber on women's rights, on family rights, and especially on single parents' rights. You have a motion later this evening, which I think is an incredible campaigning swan song. You are always quick to tell all of us what is going on in Clissold. You have literally had street activism, shall we say, on many of the big issues of the day. You've always put Clissold on the map. You've stood up for that community. You've challenged us to do better and faster. And I really thank you for everything that you've just done in Stoke Newington. You've always done it with good grace. And it's been also a joy to campaign outside your house in almost every major election. I could go on, but yeah, we do need a date. Next to you is Councillor Peters, again elected in 2014. Most recently, he has worked tirelessly as our Chief Whip. So much unsung work, and not the whipping, not the control, not the party management that you would expect, but a huge amount of sensitive pastoral care for this group and dealing with an immense amount of challenges. And you are one of the most honest and discreet people I think I've ever met in politics, and that you have brought to your Chief Whip role. You also faced challenges around cladding, the private rented sector, quality and design. You, along with your colleague, Councillor Billerton, have never, ever stopped advocating for our residents in temporary accommodation and saying, frankly, the conditions that you inherited at the Metropolitan in 2014 were not good enough. And I think it's as a result of that work that not only is the Metropolitan better, but all of the work that we're so proud of improving our hostels across the borough have taken place, from Wi-Fi to laundry. You were at the heart of those discussions and that debate. You're a great holiday companion as well, on a lighter note. And I know that the Beauvoir Estate, Kingsgate and Lochner have always been true to your heart. You've not just served one community in Beauvoir, and actually you've been assiduous in ensuring that you did not just serve the slightly sharper elbowed and the more culturally competent. You really went onto those estates, found those issues onto Beauvoir, and I hope that the lasting legacy of that is the improvements now taking place at Fermain Court, the investment plan for the estate and the 300 new homes that we plan to build there, and the Saved Rose Littman Centre. Deputy Mayor Renison asked a question earlier. She was also first elected in 2014, swiftly worked through the scrutiny system and eventually became Cabinet, first Mayoral Advisor and then Cabinet Member for Finance and Housing Needs, and then Deputy Mayor. An absolutely tireless and scrupulous councillor and representative for Kings Park, part of another dream team, dare we say, in the borough. And throughout her time on the council has been grappling with the challenges of austerity, then COVID, and then the cyber attack. And again, with Councillor Ette, a lot of that work around improving our temporary accommodation and our response to rough sleeping was led by her, and her time and investment putting into the various parts of the council that work on homelessness. She undertook the very, very, very difficult challenge of reviewing our housing lettings policy, and even later, the challenge of integrating that with our housing supply programme, and again, leading some of the most complex policies of the council. And she also still found time not to be captured by the town hall, but to be a campaigner and advocate. And some of the leading motions, including that social insecurity motion, were led by her. And I know that she will continue in her professional career as her and Jack make a new life in Yorkshire, working on benefits, welfare and advocacy, as she did before joining the council, through the council and beyond. And again, thank her for her service. Mr. Speaker, I don't have long to go. I hope you'll indulge me. I'm quite scared and terrified now, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Sharman, I know that you've got a paper later, and I think all of us will want to pay tribute for your work in Hackney Wick, but also you're not just the chair of Audit, you're the person that restored Audit to the council and then integrated it with that broader scrutiny function, always protecting the identity of Audit, working through the audit process to tackle huge issues, whether it's our capital programme, our approach to net zero, all of that co-production work around the budget process. And I just think we would not be as secure around our audit function and our financial standards, but also stretching that and really pushing those boundaries without you. You've done some deep dives into issues like SEND, use of agency spend, not allowed us to go unchallenged on our COVID response, the health of the HRA, both in public and private, making sure that there was proper scrutiny around our response to the cyber attack. And as I say, working very, very clearly around the new agenda around carbon and the climate emergency. You've also been working across London and with the LGA around audit and improving standards, and I know you've led extensive training programmes for members of the audit committee, and you've done that on a cross-party basis. You have been absolutely tireless on restoring democracy to Hackney Wick in the form of planning powers and making sure that the LLDC was truly accountable to the people of Hackney and the other Olympic boroughs. And I think that new Young Hackney Sports Centre is just one of the things that would not have happened without your tireless action and challenge back to us. And again, I really thank you, Councillor Sharman, for everything that you have done. Councillor Gregory was elected in 2010. She's been another active and tireless member of Audit Committee, a critical friend, I think it would be fair to say, of the administration, but always standing up for council tenants, sometimes not in her own ward, it has to be said, but where she lives, but also in Shacklewell, and again has been part of that response to private renters. She's had a very difficult time losing very close friends and some of the challenges that we've all faced in the borough over the last 2 years. But Councillor Gregory's life in the borough began standing up and working in our diverse cultural industries, and she is a passionate advocate for broader Dalston, the contribution of culture to our borough and its identity. And she will always talk about her time at Chats Palace and other places, and again, a stalwart activist and campaigner. And dare I say it, I wouldn't be here without her. I'll tell that story another time, perhaps. Now to my own class of 2006, Councillor Bell, who was first elected in Woodbury Down, now represents Brownswood, 2 big estate regenerations. He's been working on Woodbury Down and King's Crescent, a long-standing member of Audit and Licensing, and again, an unsung hero, making sure that our regulatory services and our responsibilities and the daytime meetings that sometimes entails are properly staffed. And again, always loyal to the administration, very active in his community. And I think along with his colleague, Councillor Potter, the King's Crescent regeneration will be a lasting legacy of Councillor Bell's advocacy and tireless commitment to the delivery of council housing in Hackney and in Brownswood. My final 4, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Hanson was also first elected in 2006 to Victoria Ward. She lives in Hackney Wick, again, a huge part of the community in that extended part of the borough. She is an incredibly active member of the council. She served as chair of group when I was secretary. The less said about my role there, the better. But at planning committee, she has stood tirelessly for an activist planning committee, but one that follows the rules and understands its responsibilities. Always asking the critical questions, standing up for good design, and representing planning committee and chairing some very difficult committees. She's also been an advocate for children and young people, both on scrutiny and SACRE, and a big champion and a stalwart activist for the new secondary school in Victoria Park. She's probably my oldest friend on the council, always generous, always there to have a gossip, knitting, but not knitting tonight, I see. And again, I could go on, but just a huge thank you for your service. And again, I know that you'll continue to serve the borough into the future, even if not on the council. Councillor Plevier, first elected again in 2006, chair of licensing subcommittee, and I think really put licensing on the map, working with whoever the policy lead has been from the cabinet, seeing us through some very difficult discussions around the SPA, the nighttime levy, licensing policy, but really making work that licensing policy for the borough and for our diverse communities. And comes from a cultural background, absolutely committed to the role of the nighttime economy, but also ensuring that it's properly regulated. I know she's also committed to casework in London Fields, has marched me many a time around the estates there as Cabinet Member for Housing and latterly as Mayor. It's just, I think unsung is how I would sum up Emma, and we really miss you and Councillor Bell in licensing. Councillor Stotts, I don't know how I can do this justice with a red light on in my left hand. But first elected in 2002, a cabinet member under Mayor Pike, chair of the planning subcommittee for 16 years, a absolutely tireless champion of the public realm, active travel, public transport, good design, people-friendly streets, the Pembury, Hackney Central, shall we say, parts of our nighttime economy and real ale. You leave probably the best legacy of any chair of planning anywhere in this capital, because you have known what planning is for, you've got stuck into the detail, you've led a committee that plays it straight, that works with officers, that gets out there and sees the good, the bad and the ugly of what you've consented, and then works out how to do even better and make sure that the best is what we have here in Hackney. And I just can't say what an absolute honour it is to serve with you. I hope you'll stay active in civic life in Hackney. I know you're a tireless public transport activist and you did that professionally, and everything that you have done through planning, wards work and cabinet is something that everyone that's come after you has only built upon. But we wouldn't have those people-friendly streets without some of the really gutsy decisions that you took back when you were cabinet member. And I know that CPZs and parking were part of that early journey, but also car-free development. That has meant that we've seen a huge amount of economic and population growth, but not the rising car ownership that many other parts of London have seen. You're also a really close friend, and I thank you. Councillor Odds, I could not finish my roundup without paying tribute to you. It's not been an unbroken service while I've been on the council, but I think you were first elected in 2004, but you may be able to correct me. You have, I think, been deputy leader and whip. Again, somebody that plays a really unsung part in the work of the council, because you turn up. You really do turn up at committees, before cabinet, every training session. You have an absolutely tireless commitment to safeguarding, and actually quite an unsung one around equalities and all of our duties as an authority. We spar and spar and spar again here, but I know that you have a deep commitment to Hackney, its history, the communities that we all serve. I think at the last meeting at full council, you ran the gamut of everything that makes you Harvey, because you don't quite know what you're going to do next, and you supported our motion at the end and said why that was so important to you. I know you worked on the buses, and you bring that passion to public service to everything that you do. I also think everyone around the Speaker, the governance service, senior officers will really miss your tireless commitment to the Constitution and understanding of everything that we do in this chamber. So perhaps you'll be back again, but I know you've made the move to Barnet, and I again thank you for everything that you have done for the council and everyone that I've paid tribute to this evening. I'm scared I've missed somebody out. If I have, someone should text me. I still have plenty of time later on in the meeting to pick up that baton. But thank you again for that 150 years public service representing this room.
Okay, I think that's sufficient, otherwise they'll want to come back. You know, Councillor Stops, for 16 years chair of planning, he always used to say, as we reach the climax of the debate, we know where we stand, we know where we are. I've started using that in my everyday life, having been on that committee for several years. But thank you all of those mentioned, for their wonderful public service and commitment. Does anyone from the opposition want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must say, me myself today, the good thing is that we can divide it into two. So I'm going to leave this part completely non-political. It's very emotional to actually have gone through this whole list. I'm not as lucky as you, Phil. I can only say thank you on my side to one member. And I will start off with Harvey. Oh, the mum's so quiet. Okay, I'll start off with Harvey. Harvey first got elected, like you said, in 2004. I actually won my first time together standing with Harvey in 2006. Not just in the council, Harvey's the same when it comes to canvassing. He takes with him the kitchen sink. So everything he's got, doesn't matter what detail it is, everything comes in the briefcase. By the time we get out to canvas, it's really time to go home because he's got to go through every single paper, make sure everything is accurate, and otherwise, no, we can't knock on doors, give me another 2 minutes. So I remember Harvey's work when it came, not just to canvassing, like you said, he was a member in the audit, in SACRA, in licensing. Probably, I would say he may have even been a member on more committees than some of you, which for Hackney was a great thing. And also he was, when it came to the council constitution, I don't think anybody can beat Harvey. I can be wrong, but I think Harvey knows it like a Bible. He knows everything, and it's like, it's his first, you know, he always says 6.2 and 6.8. I don't know what he's talking about, but he knows exactly what he's talking about. Harvey, we are going to miss you, but I do hope that we'll still see each other like we used to. And I really, really thank you for all the work you've done. And sometimes when I wasn't strong enough, there wasn't, by me, the light, it was already, I had nothing more to say. You brought this extra boost into the chamber with your point of order or something else. And I'm sure we're going to definitely miss it in the council. I wanted to go on to, obviously, once again, I wish you everything should be good, you should be healthy, wealthy, and you should have a great life and spend some time with your family. I wanted to go on, I will start with, obviously, I don't know everybody in particular, but I was chair of scrutiny, and there were certain councillors. I remember Phil was also a chair at the time with us, so was Harvey. Sorry, I can't say chair because Harvey would never let me use chair. I have to say chairman when I speak with Harvey. And Councillor Pluvier was also a member in scrutiny, and it was very interesting that most times a lot of the members from there went on to become cabinet members. I'm going to start, however, with the councillor who we used to call Doesn't Stop. Vincent Stops has been around for a long time, and basically he always had something up his sleeve and was always working. Whenever I saw him in Stamford Hill, I thought, right, either a CPZ or a bike route or something is happening. And the problem is I saw him too often in Stamford Hill. And I want to say the way you ran the planning, we may not always have agreed, but you again, very similar to the way Harvey ran his stuff, you were unbelievable in the way you done your planning and everything. And we could always have a good word. You never invited me down to the pub there on the corner on Emmis Road for a good pint, which you always enjoyed, but I'm sure you deserved it. And what I can say is, Vincent, you were really hardworking, and we are going to miss you. And I somehow could never picture Hackney without you, but it looks like it is happening. So whatever you do, Vincent, don't stop, and I'm sure you get where you want to. I wanted to continue with Councillor. I couldn't quite understand with the Brownswood councillors. I didn't understand if Councillor Potter is staying or going, because she got a thank you, but if it was a thank you for going, it was a very short thank you. But if it was a thank you for staying, then I can understand. So I wasn't quite sure. But Councillor Bell, I know you're definitely going. And I wanted to thank you also. A lot of times, you may not even remember all the years and all, you know, I think you were sitting in planning and in license. We even sat sometimes in licensing together. So all the time and the work you gave for the area, it does, some of your patch is in Stamford Hills, the corner. So I wanted to thank you for all the work. Councillor Potter, I believe you're staying, but I wasn't, so I don't think I have to. I can thank you for your work without leaving, but I don't want to take my time on that one. Councillor McMahon, I do have to say, because obviously we were Stamford Hill councillors, both of us, I do appreciate a lot of, it looks like he's not here now, a lot of the work which you did sometimes try and, you know, sometimes there's a saying by us, quiet is also good. There was sometimes a lot of controversial things, and I never heard, oh, there's that Councillor McMahon? Sorry, Councillor McMahon, I just wanted to thank you for your work, because we both were councillors in the Stamford Hill area, and I wanted to thank you the fact that I don't think we ever lifted the mouth on each other. I think we were always very, like, you know, very quiet and trying to help residents. So I wanted to thank you for the 4 years, the work you've done in the Cazeneuve, and I wish you, wherever you go, whatever you do, you should be successful. I think I'll now go slightly on a different tone, because Councillor Peters, in a way, it's, although we share a similar job, what it takes me in 2 hours can probably take you a week or something. But a lot of times I know it was hard to get me, and sometimes you weren't quite happy what I responded, but you got to realize we're both on the different ends of the table. And I do appreciate the way you always tried to connect when there was something going on, to try and hear what the opposition was saying. So thank you for all your work. Again, I'm a little bit shocked. Chief Whip in the leading party is supposed to be, I don't know, maybe it's just the name or whatever, but it sounds something big. So I don't know, maybe we'll see you in Parliament. I don't know, whatever the case is, I wish you luck with all your work. Councillor Spence, the mayor mentioned about him that he had his views. I also heard he had views, but the funny thing was, when I was waiting in the chamber to see if the views are going to materialize, they never did. So it looks like it was only a views within views. So that means he towed the whip, even though he probably had sometimes views which was quite similar to us here. But whatever the case is, whatever the case was, I was always waiting. Maybe he's going to be the one to finally break the whip, but that never happened. So whatever the case is, I'm still waiting. Still got 2 months, but I wish you luck on whatever you do, wherever you're going. And you were also a very decent guy. I remember, even though I didn't speak much to you, but I remember always coming into the chamber and always, oh, this is one of the guys who does understand us also. Councillor Sharman is another guy I have to give a special thank you to, because we are sometimes, me as Chief Whip, I'm not the easiest boy. And you insisted, you didn't stop. You were at me like a sack of potatoes, basically. You wanted to have somebody in the audit, and you wouldn't get off my phone until I gave you a name. I had to call Harvey on the same time on my other phone, asking Harvey, get that guy off my back, please get into audit. And what happened was, Harvey actually was very keen, especially he heard you're the chair. And I do know at the beginning, especially after Harvey joined, you were a gentleman. You actually came to me the whole time. I'm so glad Harvey's in the committee, and it's really going well. So I do thank you for that, and I wish you luck, whatever you do. I'm not going to be able to go through every single councillor. It's just not possible. Some of them I'll even mix up the names, because I may know most of the names, but I'm just not going to be able to. Yeah, one more councillor I have to, Councillor Rennerson. We did do work together. There was, you know, I did like the way she worked, and whenever, as a cabinet member, she actually took her lead, and I could always speak to her whenever there was an issue. So I do look up to you on the way you took your cabinet job, and I do thank you for all that you did try to help us in the opposition. All the other councillors, I thank you greatly for all your work, and I must say there are councillors here who are going to continue. who obviously, I mean, if I had to talk about Councillor Chapman, I'd probably be here till next week. But, you know, we've done a lot of work
Councillor
together.
Steinberger, I think we need to move on to the budget. So I'd rather we're not here till the next week. Could you conclude your remarks, please?
Okay. Michael, I'm going to actually finish off by you. I want to thank you because I remember last time you were speaker and this time, and don't slap me, it's chalk and cheese. You have been unbelievable. It's the first time you basically, yeah, you do go with a clock, but it's not so bad. We can work with that. But you've been very fair, a very good speaker. This is my 16th year, and I must tell you, I will remember your speakership for the way you handled us. And I really, really thank you because it gives democracy a proper, we do get to talk. So thank you very, very much for that. And I'll finish off with that, obviously.
It's a very good ending. Thank you very much, Councillor Steinberger. If you don't mind, Mayor Glanville, I'm to waive your right for reply because we must move on to the council tax. Members are reminded, this is item 8, calculation of council tax base is covered by section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. This provides that if a member owes 2 or more months arrears of council tax, they're obliged to disclose this fact to the meeting and not vote. Failure to comply is a criminal offence punishable by a fine. Mayor Glanville, do you wish to introduce your report?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to just look slightly back at the last item and say that I didn't have a chance to mention a senior officer that's leaving, or it's his last full council, and that's Ajman Ali, who's behind the screen in front of me. He's leaving Hackney in April to return to Sheffield. He's been Hackney's Group Director for Neighbourhoods and Housing since 2018, but was first Director of Housing Services, then obviously Interim Director, and then he was confirmed for a process at the end of December 2020. And I know he has been an enormous source of strength from myself, Councillor Mackenzie and others that have worked with him. And you have faced some of the most difficult challenges that the council has, some of the most impactful services in terms of our public realm. And I just thank you for your time here at Hackney, the tireless work that you've done around Bridport House, especially forensic there and showing leadership, but also on broader fire safety and some of the repairs, recovery work. And you've always done it with good grace. And I'd love to go on more, but I can't because of the hour. And I wish you all the best for the role as Executive Director of Operational Services at Sheffield. Some challenges there, I think, to go into, but I'm sure all of us at the Council wish you all the best. Mr. Speaker, I think I sowed some confusion. Obviously, Councillor Potter is not leaving us, and Councillor Bella's always represented Brownswood. It was just two different Brownswoods. Our phrase that matches yours is "you can't stop the stops." So I leave that and turn the page on that section. It's very tempting, given the hour and the important motions that we also have this evening, to just say, as set out, Mr. Speaker, but that would be a disservice to the biggest decision that we're taking tonight, but also the most important decision that we take in the course of a year. And indeed, there are only 4 budgets per administration, and it's important as we set out our political agenda for some of the tough decisions that we have to take. This is my 6th budget, the 4th of this administration, and the 2nd budget during the pandemic and the cyber attack. It is clearly shaped by the pandemic. It's clearly shaped by the impact of the cyber attack, and that is shaped by the financial impact on the council and the considerable increase in need that we have across the borough. It would have been absolutely impossible to prepare without the support of Councillor Chapman, Deputy Mayor Renison in the past, and obviously all Cabinet Members of Finance leave a legacy behind them and ways of working. And I think the sort of triumvirate way of working between Councillors Renison, Chapman and myself, with Councillors Gordon and Sharman, the broader scrutiny team, has meant that this is truly co-produced across Cabinet and across all members of the majority group. And there's always that opportunity through scrutiny for the opposition to be involved as well. Senior officer leaders, Ian and Jackie are here tonight from the finance team, but it's a whole CLT and chief executive effort, and I thank them for their work. I think this is, in some ways, a steady-as-she-goes budget, but obviously it comes after 12 years of austerity, and it faces some of the toughest headwinds I think we have ever faced as a council. And I think it was Deputy Mayor Nicholson that highlighted the challenges around procurement and the cost of materials. But inflation, the skills gaps, the rising need, the uncertainty over local government finance, and both myself and Mayor Pipe have sort of Cassandra-like said it's going to be terrible in the years to come. But I think there are real hints within the budget settlement that we're living with and its short-termism that suggests that it is going to be just as difficult as we suggest. Two reasons. It is a one-year funding settlement from government, and one of the most significant alleged increases and stabilisation factors within our spending power, and that is a difficult term because it doesn't mean in any way what it's suggested to be, is the services support grant. It's nearly £8 million. It's a one-off pot of funding, and it stabilises us. There is no certainty about whether it will be there next year. And the government constantly talks about reform to local government finance, and we've talked about the Fair Funding Review numerous times here. And for all of the really positive noises that we get out of Secretary of State Gove, that he won't level up the country by levelling down London, the political realities of that and how the Treasury view these issues, I still think are very different. And you see that in the funding settlement for health and social care. So allegedly, we're starting to really grapple with the funding gap and challenges around social care. You know, Councillor Kennedy refers to them a lot here. Councillor Hayhurst scrutinises those challenges. But we have that 1.5% increase in national insurance. Huge cost pressure for the local authority. And it's absolutely right that we think about those waiting lists within elective care especially, but all of those people at risk because they are waiting for operations within the NHS. But that will only get worse if we don't fund prevention and social care, because this is a conveyor belt, and we need to have the resources to take the long-term decisions to support our most vulnerable residents in adult social care, but not just support them to exist. And I think this is where Councillor Maxwell's portfolio weaves into this. We want a life for our older residents, our disabled residents of working age, and those that are supported by social care to be a flourishing one. It can be a life of work, it can be a life of volunteering, other caring responsibilities, family life. The richness of everything that underpins that in a borough like Hackney requires some of the discretionary prevention spend that if we go and continue to go down the direction of travel, we will not have in the future. And it's those universal services and how they interact with those statutory services that support the most vulnerable that we're continuing to invest in this budget, but we have to caution about the future. We're making savings tonight, and they go back to the OFP in December 2021 that rightly protect frontline services. And I've said that term doesn't really exist, but it's an easy term for the services that support our residents, but it is also those core services that I referenced earlier on. We are doing that by raising revenue, the vacancy factor, reducing unnecessary spend on I've lost my thread. Unnecessary spend on agency staff, all the things you would expect us to do. We are also insourcing services, being more efficient with our estate, all of the things and wheezes and innovations that we have kept going through austerity to make sure that we haven't had to take some of the difficult decisions in other places. But you can only go so far with that agenda, and it's going to be true service transformation along with advocating for a better financial settlement that ultimately will see Hackney through into the future. I'm not going to list everything that we're investing in. There'll be plenty of time for that in the communications that surround this budget, but I'm really proud that we're continuing to take the long-term decisions, whether it's around our own housing stock, our public realm, the climate emergency, our town centres, our leisure infrastructure, and some of those big areas of capital spend. But I say all of that infrastructure is for nothing if you don't have the revenue spend to spend on council officers that make those places tick, maintain them, and support our most vulnerable residents. I said that spending power is a misnomer, and that is because the government announced the spending power of local government, and they announced the spending power of Hackney Council. But in terms of our actual spending power underpinned by central government funding that is not one-off, I think it's less than £1 million of actual increase in spending power after £140 million worth of cuts and over a decade of austerity. And within that spending power is the expectation that we will increase council tax, a regressive tax that always hits the vulnerable, or face a £2.7 million black hole in our finances. And so that is why we take the sober and reflective decision to recommend that council tax rise this evening of 2.99%. And it is less than £1 extra a week for the average resident. But I know at the edges of that, it will still have an impact, and we don't take that decision lightly, even with one of the lowest council tax rates in London and all the value for money services that we continue to provide. I'll stop there, Mr. Speaker, given the late hour. I commend the budget to the Chamber, thank everyone that has played a part in putting it together, and will actually have to deliver it for the Council in the year ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. We have the Conservative Group amendment in writing, and it's been proposed by Councillor Steinberger and seconded by Councillor Odds formally. Do you wish to speak to your amendment, Councillor Steinberger? Right, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will start off by saying, obviously, we can't produce a total separate budget because obviously the current administration has got their policies which they indicate how they want to run the council, and we can't come and stop it, which is, in a way unfortunate. But we have to obviously do as much as we can to at least have something which can help the residents, and that the residents get the best value for money they can. Now, before I start, I wanted to thank Jackie and obviously Ian for all the time and everything that he gives to make sure that we get our budget through. And it's very interesting. I always know that when I've got to do work with Ian, it's going to be done. Even though yesterday I still didn't know when I'm going to meet him, I knew that the budget will be there. So we had the papers and everything, and work was done from obviously it's harder now to meet the whole time. But I really thank you the way you gave us today, your time and your effort to help us as much as, obviously not telling us what to do, but to listen to what we wanted and to accommodate us how much you could. Now, I know the typical response, what Phil's going to say, oh, it's the same thing as always, it's the same this as always. The fact is, I'm here to represent people from Hackney. I'm not here now from a government perspective. We live in Hackney. I care now about Hackney. Now, if you look at the budget, the part of the mayoral part, which is Sadiq Khan, I'll just give you some figures so you should know what's going on. Since Sadiq Khan became mayor, from his part of the council tax, 43% increase. It'll be very interesting to know if there was any increase at all under Boris Johnson. And under the previous mayor, Ken Livingstone, there was also no such a thing as such a hike in council tax. Everybody, the way I see it the whole time in this chamber, it's always somebody else's fault. It's the government, it's the police, it's the officers, it's us. It's always somebody's fault. But somewhere along the line, money is disappearing and getting mismanaged. Now, I'll give you an example. Sadiq Khan has had in 2021, this email was given to me a few months ago, 455 TfL officers who are being paid over £100,000 a year. 455 officers. Man alive, I'm going there tonight. I'll be part of the party. And then another £6.2 million for payoffs. So there's something is really wrong there, what's going on with the money. You know, this is just in TfL. I'm not talking in other departments. Now, I'll go back to us, to our budget. There was, a simple thing. You're implementing different things in a time of COVID, whether it's LTNs, whether it's CPZ. There was a consultation in Zone U. Today, residents got through their doors. Despite the result of the consultation, 42% said they want 10 to 12. There's a new idea. They're going to split the zone. That wasn't in the consultation. This is the only consultation where until now, Hackney actually listened to the residents. I don't know if you realize that, Phil. This is the only consultation where you were bound what the residents wrote. Normally, that's what you've done until now. Check it on the CPZ. This is the first time you're taking a zone and you're telling the people no, you're going here, you're staying with your old timing. That's not what the consultation was. Why did you do consultation? Now, at the end of the day, these people have had a consultation. This is just a small little icing on the cake. I'll go through different things which we've had here, which are being proposed. For instance, the Hackney today. The Hackney today. Is it really worth its money? Is it
Could
really
you conclude your remarks, because we have to move on? Just the last few moments.
Basically, I believe it's unfair for the residents to have to pay so much money. We are proposing a £54.7 reduction. This is at least something that the residents in such a difficult time should be able to afford. This council tax is much too much. I don't believe it's fair the residents should pay so much. I did ask Phil, and I'll say it again. Like you mentioned, all the councils together to sit down together from this department, that department. I don't know why we can't join in this discussion when you have 5 or 6 councils sitting together. And the fact is that £54.7 is still not enough. And obviously it's very helpful that the government is giving this £150 to residents to have a further reduction. One thing I will mention, whilst I'm talking about that people who have set up the direct debits, a lot of them are actually vulnerable residents who are having much more money taken out than until now. And what's happening is they're told they're hacking. So there's a lot of things here which are non-acceptable.
Thank
this
you,
is why
Councillor
I'm putting forward this thing. People who are the most vulnerable are losing, they don't have money, and we have to find a solution where we don't waste so much public money. I'm sorry, Phil.
Thank you. Councillor Odd, do you wish to second this? Do you want to speak? Go ahead.
Oh, yes. Did you expect otherwise? As it happens, I formally second the amendment, first of all. As it happens, I had no intention of speaking on this evening. I was just going to formally second it. But then when I saw the people outside the building and I noticed the paragraph, I realised we had the paragraph in there about reviewing implementation of public realm schemes, which basically what we're saying is we will remove all LTNs when we get elected, when the new Conservative administration takes power in May. The LTNs are a disaster. They're costing money because they are increasing the pressure on the health service. And these statistics, these twisted and biased statistics that have been produced to show that the LTNs have actually reduced pollution. When I drove down Dalston Lane this evening, and it was stop, start all the way. Dalston Lane's always been a busy road, but it usually used to flow. And now that it's stop, start all the way because of these new LTNs, it's producing noxious gases which are impacting our children's health and elderly people's health. And by getting the fines from these LTNs is not helping us. They are far outweighed by the cost to our residents' health and the cost to the National Health Service because of it. And if for nothing else, then I commend this amendment to the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Odd. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Odds, you've talked about how you care about children's health, but I'm really disappointed that you're wanting to not have funding for King's Hall swimming pool, which is in my ward, and it's a long due need for repairs for that pool, which absolutely we know on a regular 2-3 times a day, I see lines of children going from our schools across that part of Hackney to go to King's Hall, where many children have learnt to swim, and we hope for many more to be able to learn to swim there. So I'd just like to question where that fits in with you wanting to be so concerned about children's health.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. Councillor Hayhurst.
In health scrutiny, we see the very real cost pressures, and that's very difficult. At the end of the day, we understand we've got to balance the budget, and we're also very grateful for the way that it provides reserves. Do I need the microphone? Okay, all right. Provides reserves, but also money when it's needed for new political priorities when they emerge, and you do that year on year, Ian, so thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, if you would just allow me very cheekily, whether it be A-boards, CPZs, drop curbs, and many of those areas, Vincent, you've been ahead of your time. You're ahead of your time on many of the areas you still continue to push. By banging on about those items day in, day out, you educate us as councillors, and it seeps in amongst the officers, and it delivers policy results. You've achieved an awful amount. Sophie and I will miss you greatly. Your wit, your collection of jackets, stylish as they are, the support you've given us, your hard work. We wish you and Rita a very happy retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayhurst. The final speaker on this amendment is Councillor Susan Fajama-Thomas.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Just to echo my colleagues, thanks to Ian Williams' team, the Mayor and Councillor Chapman for the work they've done on this, on the budget they've presented tonight. But I just want to go to the opposition's budget and just want to pick one of the things in there, which is the program around the lead, the LID bulb replacement. Whilst it's energy conservation that is driving this, I just want to point out something about the recent consultation we had with women in this borough, and say to colleagues, the colleagues in the opposition colleagues, that this program is actually killing 2 birds with 1 stone. One of the areas that women that responded to that consultation or identify was well-lit street. And with this program, I believe the LED bulb is quite, it will bring one of the things that women have identified as making them feel uncomfortable, which is poorly lit street. This program of LED replacement will actually illuminate our street and fulfill that areas of women that women have put forward. So I just want to say I'm so surprised. I know you were anti the work we are doing around climate emergency, but just to draw that out, that actually this is about safety of women in the borough, that have said they want a well-lit street. And with this replacement, our street will be well illuminated and women will feel more comfortable in some of the areas in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fajama. Councillor Chapman, did you want to say a few words? Then I'll ask Councillor Steinberg if he wishes to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you want me to deal with just the amendment or make a response on only amendment? Okay, then. Well, I think it's fairly obvious to say that the fault with this amendment represents the fault that the opposition government exhibits in many of its financial decisions. It's penny pinching and it's short-termism. I think almost everything in there is a reduction in vitally needed repair work, improvement work, which will only save, it won't save any money in the longer term. It just results in worse services, declining quality of the public infrastructure, and a much bigger bill at the end of it. So it is a completely ineffective amendment and obviously should be opposed.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. We'll take two more then. Deputy Mayor Bramble, then Councillor Rathbone.
Thank you, Chair. I was more going to speak in light of what the Mayor was saying on the budget, but I can frame it around the opposition's amendments. Mr. Speaker, maybe I've overlooked the amendments, but I see nothing in here to respond to the 60p in every pound that local government has lost. In these amendments, Mr. Speaker, I can see nothing to speak to the £1.7 billion local government has lost in early intervention funds, while need for children's services, adult social services continues to be on the rise, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I heard a comment on our spending money. It's only because officers in this chamber and throughout the organisation and elected members have worked so hard to ensure that they demonstrate fiscal responsibilities, that the decisions that other local authorities had to make sooner down the track, Hackney is only now coming to those difficult decisions because of the shared determination and hard work, Mr. Speaker. And it is outrageous to think of anything otherwise. What I would say, Mr. Speaker, if I come to an end before you start looking at the clock, what I would say is that central government and local government here do work in parallel, Mr. Speaker. Because this government that we have in Parliament has taken 5 years to determine every year a one-year financial settlement for local government, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Chapman may say differently, but I think a year is a long time enough for government to be able to provide a financial settlement. And if they had taken just 3 years out of that 5 years, we could have had a 2-year local settlement for local government. They haven't done that. And just as central government has given a year-on-year a settlement that is not good enough, these amendments that you continue to present before us year after year are not good enough. We remain aspirational for our children, our families, our community in the diverse way that this government has put down these draconian cuts on our communities. It is not good enough. And Mr. Speaker, I think that this is not acceptable, these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Finally, Councillor Rathbone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know you can't see me, so I did an electronic hand. I'd like to thank Ian Williams and his team for all their work, and to Councillor Chapman and to the Mayor and other councillors who've made so much contribution, particularly Cabinet members, to help to get a balanced budget. It's truly a wonderful thing to see in the kind of circumstances we've been in. There's so much to say about this budget, but I think this amendment, but I think the word that comes to my mind is mean and niggardly. It's nothing, as Councillor Bramble's just said, there's no aspiration in this at all. It's a negative, cut this, cut that. A mean thing, reduce highways maintenance, so you don't want roads properly repaired anymore. Deferment of the planned investment in libraries, so you clearly don't want anything done with Stamford Hill Library as we are proposing. Rephasing of investment in King's Hall. What a mean thing to say. That's an improvement to people's lives, to people's fitness, and so on. I could go on and on. Each part is mean. And then we come to the favourite, of course, which is Hackney Today. Every single year, I have said this for many years, and I remember that Jules Pipe used to say it, Hackney Today and Hackney Life balances it out. It doesn't actually cost us anything.
Your remarks,
When will you
Rathbone?
listen to this? When will you hear it? It's there in the accounts if you bothered to look, which you haven't. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to say it's the usual thing, such is their financial acumen, that when you start to look on page 2 and 3, you hear review of the way in which officers support members. Cost, is that included in it? Review of our street crossing patrols. Is the cost there? No. Thorough research project to determine the feasibility of raising revenue income from advertisements. Is that in there? No, not at all. And we can go on. Each time something's proposed, a review of the consultation process, no costing in your actual financial
Thank you
figures.
very much,
So
Councillor
I would like to say this not only must be rejected, it's time the Tories went on a training course for finance.
Mayor Glanville, did you want to say anything on the amendment or wait till the substantive motion?
I won't speak later, so I'll speak now. Thank you very much for indulging me. It is, as set out, kind of Groundhog Day, as people have suggested. It's mean-spirited and short-term. And I think if that's their manifesto for the borough, I think they need to definitely go on some training for the elections to come, because that does not reflect Hackney values, our diverse communities, or the priorities of the borough. We had a values-driven budget, which signals really clearly what we believe in, and this is just reductive. And I just do not understand how it could have been financially put together as the last budget of this administration. It seems to it knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing, I think, to quote probably my mother. We did get something new though. I think we got from Councillor Rodds an admission that cars may cause pollution, because I think that has been in dispute for his entire time in the council, and he may have suggested, rather than saying that he would drive his diesel car around the borough wherever he wanted to, that perhaps there was a problem with traffic in the borough. I'd love to tell the residents of the Beauvoir that their LTNs are coming out, or Brownswood, or Frampton Park, or Stoke Newington, because I think, again, they will reject you at the ballot box, never mind those places we've made those interventions. Turning just very quickly to the GLA, all the mayor is doing is plugging the gaps in his budget at London level left by Mayor Johnson and by austerity. Police, fire, housing and transport funding. That's the priorities of the Mayor of London, and that is what he is investing in, and he's finally started to return more police to our streets. I do find it interesting you mentioned the LIP programme. That doesn't exist because of the actions of the Conservative government. All we have is an overprescribed active travel plan that even we can't make work for us in the borough, and that is a point I constantly make to government ministers. I could go on, Mr. Speaker, but I hope that this chamber will reject this budget. It's mean-spirited, short-term, and doesn't reflect the values of our borough.
Before I invite Councillor Steinberger to reply, we do need to extend this meeting, but it is a critical meeting. It is the last meeting. Councillor Peters, do you want to put a motion? Is that agreed? Right, Councillor Steinberger, do you wish to?
It's very, very interesting. You can see the difference on the two sides. When Gordon Brown left, he left a note saying he's left no money. There is no money there. With Sadiq Khan spending 43% extra he needs for council tax, with all these extra things he's doing, all these other extra cabinet members. I'm not going into all individual this, and yet it's not his fault. It's Boris. It's previous. Everything is previous. There's the option of starting. We should learn how to budget. If we have to learn how to budget, I wonder when you're going to learn how to budget, because at the end of the day, it's the same people who have to pay the council tax, who haven't been receiving the housing benefit, who have not been receiving other things for a long time. You haven't delivered on the things that they're supposed to be getting. There's all these excuses. The fact is, there are probably 20,000 people in this borough who are currently not getting the housing benefit. I remember hearing last year from you, Mayor, you were saying that by a few months we'll be out of it. You're saying the same song now, continuing, and this can't continue. We are saying this is basically, it's not acceptable. We have to look at solutions. Nobody said that this 2-page is our, how did you call it, our manifesto for the borough. This is not a manifesto, not a we don't come up with such a kind of manifestos. This is to try to make the minimal damage that there currently is. It's not acceptable that people in Band D should just have to pay extra money so that people in City Hall should have wages of over £100,000. It's unacceptable. We have to look on ways of affordability that people should be able to afford. And this is the way we are putting forward. So it's either this or continue spending. There's a saying in Yiddish, azak mit haloch, which means the way you're working is a sack with a hole. There's no limit on how much money you want to spend. All you want to do is spend, spend, spend. People cannot afford it. It's very simple.
Thank you, Councillor Steinberger. Now, because it's a budget vote, we have to have a recorded vote on the amendment. So can we go ahead?
Councillor Bell? Against. Deputy Mayor Bramble? Against. Councillor Cameron? Councillor Cameron against. Councillor Chapman? Councillor Chapman against. Councillor Coburn? Councillor Coburn against. Councillor Conway? Isn't here. Councillor Desmond? Against. Councillor David?
Against.
Against. Councillor Etty? Councillor Fajana Thomas?
Against.
Mayor Glanville? Councillor Gordon? Councillor Gordon against. Councillor Hanson? Councillor Hanson against. Councillor Hayhurst? Councillor Hayhurst against. Councillor Kennedy? Councillor Kennedy against. Councillor Alyssa? Isn't present. Councillor Lynch? Isn't present. Councillor Maxwell? Councillor Mackenzie? Councillor McMahon? Councillor McMahon against. Councillor Momer?
Against.
Councillor Momer against. Deputy Mayor Nicholson? Deputy Mayor Nicholson against. Councillor Odds? Councillor Odds for. Councillor Osler Canley? Councillor Osler Canley against. Councillor Osland? Against. Councillor Patrick? Councillor Patrick against. Councillor Palace? Against. Councillor Peters? Councillor Poulier? Not present. Councillor Potter? Councillor Potter against. Councillor Rathbone? Councillor Rathbone against. Councillor Renison? Not present. Councillor Ricard? Councillor Ricard against. Councillor Sharman? Councillor Sharman against. Councillor Sizer?
For.
Sorry, it's Councillor Sizer. Councillor Steinberger. Councillor Smith? Against. Councillor Snell? Councillor Steinberger?
Sorry about that. For.
Councillor Stopps? Councillor Stopps against. Councillor Troughton? Councillor Troughton against. Councillor Webb? Councillor Webb against. Councillor Williams? Councillor Williams against. Councillor Woodley? Councillor Woodley against. Councillor Young? Councillor Young against. The amendment falls.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Steinberger, only one go, I'm afraid, but there we are. We've had a formal seconding of the motion to extend from Councillor Rathbone. We now come to the substantive motion. Does anyone wish to speak on that? No? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In view of the hour, I'll edit my contribution as I go along. And the Mayor has obviously set out the overall situation and the position behind this values-driven budget, and he's spoken about the huge impact that coronavirus has had on the community, both in terms of health impacts and isolation, but also in terms of council spending. We've spoken about austerity, which, as I said to council last time, in my view, continues. We've had a 40% reduction in resources since 2010, which equates to £140 million grant less than it did then. On top of that, we've got the rising inflation and costs which affecting council, which ended up with an 11 million gap, and we've, for that reason, proposing a council tax increase to partly meet that. And as the Mayor again said, this has been more or less forced on us by the way that the government has put its core funding proposals together, ensuring that council tax rises are included in that core funding. The council will ensure that it does its best with the resources it has, and we're providing value for money for all our residents, and delivering services and supporting those, all our residents again, but particularly those in greatest needs. I'd just draw your attention to just the scale of what we still can do, that despite austerity, the council provides us a huge range of services. And you can see this illustrated in Appendix 2, which is the list of the council services, which there's no need to repeat them here. You know, the huge range of things that the council does, all of which are vital to supporting our residents and supporting the well-being of the borough. And we still, despite austerity, spend, as you'll see here, just over £1 billion. Range of things, including benefits and issues like that. There's also the capital programme, which is in Appendix 7. Again, huge amount of resources there. And it's not just the big things I draw your attention to. Obviously, we're the issues like the Britannia project, where we've opened a new sports centre and a new school, and we're now building much needed housing for local people. But there's also lots and lots of little things there as well, or smaller things. The schools programme and improvements to schools, parks, the improvements to highways, which will improve our safety on our roads and air quality, all things that add to making Hackney, and improving the well-being and lives of our residents. So despite 11 years of austerity, I commend this budget to the council. I just say that it just shows the difference what a council can make in an era, and particularly the difference, if I may say so, that a Labour council can make.
Councillor Gordon, did you want to speak?
Very, very briefly, given the lateness of the hour, I support everything that Councillor Chapman and the Mayor have said in support of this budget. This has been a sort of process over the years. Councillor Sharman and myself have had the opportunity to contribute to this, and I'd like to think that has produced, sort of ongoing improved process and increase the transparency on behalf of the residents we serve. I mean, I'd also like, obviously, to pay tribute to Ian Williams and to Jackie and all their team who've worked really tirelessly, as already been said, and I think in sustaining our borough financially through this incredibly challenging period over the last couple of years on behalf of our residents. And I look forward, to working with you more in relation to our new policy-led approach, which we're going to go forward into the next administration with a focus on supporting our most vulnerable residents and our most vulnerable residents with the new emerging poverty and equality strategies. So I commend this budget. It's an ambitious budget, it's a balanced budget, and it's something that is on the behalf of the people of Hackney that I think is going to give us the best possible chance for the future. I will be supporting the budget, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Mayor Glanville, you now have the right to reply.
Well, I said I wasn't going to use it, but Councillor Steinberger said that I'd stood here and said that we were going to fix everything and nothing's been fixed. 120,000 of the cyber-related backlog have been processed, and that goes across new claims, claims for temporary accommodation, changes in circumstances, the complex relationship between us and DWP when it comes to both universal credit and housing benefits, and over 1,000 complex discrepancy cases. That means that due to cyber, there are no outstanding housing benefit new claims related to cyber, just the normal processing times. There's ditto with temporary accommodation new claims. Yes, there is still 10,000 changes in circumstances to process, but we have processed 18,000 of those already due to cyber, 120,000 out of backlog while processing every single new claim and rebuilding those systems. It's a tireless effort, and I think the fact that there are no outstanding new CTRS claims as a result of the cyber attack shows we've also targeted this towards the most vulnerable that need support with their council tax and their rents. It hasn't been easy. Have we got it right all the time? No. Are there still people waiting? Absolutely. But there's tireless teams working at the council to make sure that we get this right and fix it, and they have my full support.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. We'll now have a roll call, and if you say for, against or abstain.
Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell for. Deputy Mayor Bramble. Deputy Mayor Bramble for. Councillor Cameron. Councillor Cameron for. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chapman for. Councillor Coburn. Councillor Coburn for. Councillor David.
For.
Councillor David for. Councillor Desmond. Councillor Desmond for. Councillor Etty. Councillor Etty for. Councillor Fajana Thomas.
For.
Councillor Fajana Thomas for. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Gordon for. Mayor Glanville. Mayor Glanville for. Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson for. Councillor Hayhurst. Councillor Hayhurst for. Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Kennedy for. Councillor Lynch. Councillor Lynch for. Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Maxwell for. Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mackenzie for. Councillor McMahon. Councillor McMahon for. Councillor Moma.
For.
Councillor Moma for. Deputy Mayor Nicholson. Deputy Mayor Nicholson for. Councillor Odds. Councillor Odds against. Councillor Ozzy-Canley. Councillor Ozzy-Canley for. Councillor Ozen. Councillor Ozen for. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Patrick for. Councillor Palace. Councillor Palace for. Councillor Peters. Councillor Peters for. Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter for. Councillor Rathbone. Councillor Rathbone for. Councillor Ricard. Councillor Ricard for. Councillor Sharman. Councillor Sharman for. Councillor Smith. Councillor Smith for. Councillor Snell. Councillor Snell for. Councillor Steinberger. Councillor Steinberger against. Councillor Stopps. Councillor Stopps for. Councillor Troughton. Councillor Troughton for. Councillor Webb. Councillor Webb for. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams for. Councillor Woodley. Councillor Woodley for. Councillor Young. Councillor Young. Budget's passed.
Thank you. We now have a budget. Agenda item 9, annual report of the Audit Committee. Councillor Sharman, do you wish to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the Audit Committee has a key role in reassuring Hackney's residents and councillors that the community's resources are being used efficiently and effectively to achieve the policies that people voted for. And to do that, the committee looks at the council's past accounts, its current performance, and its plans for the future. My job tonight is to tell you what the committee's done over the past year to carry out these responsibilities. And my overall message to you is that Hackney's performance, its financial management and planning, and its compliance with procedures are all in good shape. However, in each of these 3 areas, we face real problems and increasing challenge. Looking first at the past, I'm glad to say that the external audit of our accounts has given us a clean bill of health. However, there have been unacceptable delays in signing off our recent accounts. Although the cyber attack made auditing more difficult over the last couple of years, the real problem we're facing is a crisis in local government auditing. Many councils across the country haven't reported results for over 2 years. And that's been the effect of the government's compulsory privatisation of local government audit and its insistence on applying commercial business rules to local government accounts. This was a truly bad decision that's left the sector in chaos. In our case, it's meant waiting over a year for our accounts rather than the 3 months as in the past. And adding insult to injury, we're likely to see a big rise in the bill for our external audit next year. Our second area of responsibility is to keep an eye on the council's current performance, and we do this in 3 ways. First, we look in detail every quarter at the delivery performance of the council's main services. Second, we review how each service and how the council as a whole has assessed and mitigated the risks it faces. And third, along with the scrutiny chair representatives, we meet monthly with the executive member for finance to see if we're on track to hit our current budget targets. And that's been crucial, as Councillor Gordon talked about earlier, been crucial over the last couple of years. It's helped build trust between the executive and backbench councillors at a time of unprecedented spending and short-term government funding. And it's done a lot to ensure there is a real backbench understanding and oversight of our finances. And I strongly recommend that initiative continues under the next administration. Looking generally at service performance and risk, we found the council is performing well, but I have to warn, we face big performance and financial risks ahead. Further government cuts are likely to hit us hard. Our own rent and council tax debt continues to rise, and we're still coping with the deep damage caused by the cyber attack. And of course, we continue to face enormous pressures, we heard earlier, in the adult and children's services, on top of Hackney's perennial crisis of housing provision and quality. The third and increasingly important part of the Audit Committee remit is to look ahead and to answer the question that private companies and now many local authorities have to answer. Is the council a going concern? In other words, will its prospective income and management plans enable it to achieve its policy objectives? The financial projections for the next 2 years show we still have gaps in funding. But based on our past experience, we believe those gaps are well within the council's reach with careful management. The problem is, if we look further ahead, there are some really serious threats on the horizon. We all know the world is going to have to cope with enormous social challenges and that local government will be at the sharp end of them. Whether it's climate change, the joint management of health and social care, ensuring residents have access to decent housing, combating poverty, all these go beyond the responsibility of individual departments and indeed beyond the council itself. And meeting these vitally important ambitions mean we must have credible, adequately funded management plans in place, even though we know the government's failure to fund local government over the longer term will undermine our capacity. But it's our own management and executive accountabilities that will need to be built around these overall big ticket priorities while we retain departmental professional expertise. And that'll be a real challenge for the next and future administrations and for its audit committees. Mr. Speaker, this is my audit committee swan song, my last report as chair, but it's also a personal swan song for a 50-year career in local government. So I hope you'll give me time for a couple of reflections. In 1972, I first tramped the streets as a callow community housing worker in a GLC scheme to clear the last slums of North Kensington. Since then, I've worked on economic regeneration for the GLC and the GLA, run London's education, transport and supply service, delivered highways and education services across the country, and I've been a borough deputy chief executive. But these last 8 years as a councillor have been a true joy, a great finale. I've been so proud to have had this wonderful opportunity to contribute to local government in this vital role, a vital way, a role where one's only boss are local residents, members of the heart of local government, and long may that continue. But based on that experience, I've got a couple of asks of Hackney's next administration. First, that we build on the audit committee. It's one of the most crucial tools that backbenchers have to fulfill their oversight function. Yet it's an undervalued and underused part of local government. It's gradually getting more visibility in London and nationally, and I'm pleased we in Hackney have played a part in that. I'm also proud of the initiatives the committee's taken in the borough itself, especially in building a systematic oversight of the council's operations and in the deep dives we've done in critical areas. Mr. Speaker, over my career in local government, I've seen the sector become ever more centralised. In my view, there's now a serious danger to local democracy as local authorities become little more than the local arm of central government, people treated as no more than consumers of minimum levels of service. And I believe that threat can only be met by rooting ourselves in our communities, doing things with people and not for them. So my second plea is that we build on the first steps we're taking in creating an alternative vision of how local government can work, building our services from the ground up, rooting them in the community. I've been delighted to see the way emerging policy ideas for a new service delivery model that involves the council working in partnership with local people, with community groups, and with service users. It's a vision we glimpsed in the first few months of lockdown, when we successfully built on the amazing outpouring of community support. Do this right, and I believe we will create a resilient and popular public service, able to resist the steady centralisation of power that I've witnessed over the last half century. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to give my heartfelt thanks to officers and to you all for a chance to contribute to keeping Hackney as the extraordinary, diverse and tolerant place it is today. It was my father's, my grandfather's, and even my great-grandfather's home, and it's been my home for nearly 40 years. I couldn't be prouder that I've ended my local government here in Hackney. Thank you very much.
Councillor Sharman, that was very eloquent, and I'm sure you've got a huge commitment and ability to convey your ideas outside the council, and we'll listen very carefully. Can members agree the recommendations in this report? Thank you very much. Item 10 is a pay policy statement. Now, you've got the report in the agenda. Any questions will be answered in writing by the Chief Executive. Can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. Item 11, appointments as Deputy Electoral Registration Officers. Similarly, if there's any questions, the Chief Executive has offered to write a written response. Can members agree the recommendations? Item 12, appointments to committees. Members will see we have a report proposing appointments to the Constitution Committee. Do members agree to this? Agreed. We now come to the motion. Now, this has to be fairly succinct and lucid, but it's an important motion. Could I ask Councillor Cameron to propose it, please? Yes.
I know this, I should have said this much earlier at the beginning of the meeting, but the minutes of the last meeting, the motion there, could it be noted in them that it was agreed unanimously?
Okay, that will be noted. Councillor Cameron, do you wish to propose the motion?
However, many women are offered antidepressants without any consideration, sometimes due to poor training and awareness.
Councillor Cameron, can you speak directly into the microphone, please?
The last one. Right. The last one. Where's the last one? Yeah.
As chair of the Women's Network at my employer, I organised a series of events about the menopause last year, which were attended by over 300 women. A recurrent theme was the difficulty in identifying and treating the wide-ranging symptoms. Crucially, there is no single reliable diagnostic test available to pinpoint the start of the perimenopause. The process can go on for years and can prove challenging given the well-established difficulties women often experience in accessing appropriate health services. Transgender people and women of colour may have additional challenges in terms of managing symptoms and accessing appropriate healthcare. Mr. Speaker, this is an equalities issue. Not all women will experience debilitating symptoms, but all women will go through the menopause. Menopausal women are the fastest growing section of the UK workforce, and recent studies have shown that there's a spike in the number of women aged 45 to 55 leaving the workplace at a critical point in their careers. The hidden impacts of menopause, such as reduced confidence and increased anxiety, can be particularly difficult for those used to functioning at a high level in the workplace. If we want women to work, we need to provide adequate support. I'm proud to report that Hackney Council has recently introduced a workplace menopause and menstruation policy, developed in consultation with staff and trade union representatives, and I thank officers and Councillor Williams, Cabinet Member for Employment, Skills and Human Resources, for their work. At a local level, Hackney has also seen some fantastic work by its partner healthcare organisations, with a pilot programme organised by Hackney Marshes PCN and the Menopause Virtual Group Consultation Pilot Programme, run under Dr. Sue Mann of the Homerton Hospital Community Gynaecology team. But we only have one specialist menopause consultant at the Homerton Hospital. We need more resources, more expertise, and a more holistic approach. At a national level, the menopause is definitely, finally, having a moment. We welcome the establishment of a new all-party parliamentary group on menopause and the government's recent commitment to examining the cost of HRT prescriptions for women in England and the establishment of a menopause task force. Last year's Women's Health Strategy Call for Evidence received the biggest ever response to a Department for Health and Social Care consultation, with over 110,000 individual responses. Access to HRT and wider menopause support were key concerns for older women. So, ahead of International Women's Day next week, please join me in supporting the motion and helping over half of the UK population access the support they need.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Etty, would you like to second?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, seconded. I second the motion. Can I go ahead and say a few words considering the time, Mr. Speaker?
Okay. Does anyone wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Odds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief. but I must make 3 points. The first one is not directly related to the motion, but it's to reiterate what I said last time. We have a quarter of an hour for this motion, partly thanks due to Putin's lunatic brutality, which we used over half an hour of our meeting, necessarily, but partly due to the number of meetings that we have where other things could have been moved to. 5 minutes to discuss the Audit Committee report is paltry. 15 minutes to discuss this motion, where even though it's down for 30 minutes, is ridiculous. This is a very important motion. I wish to register my support for it. It's something that is greatly needed and is greatly overlooked. And from what I've heard, even a lot of GPs don't understand what the problem is, and they themselves need educating. The other thing is to say that this part of the meeting, I just said before that I asked for last meeting's motion to be recorded as unanimously agreed. This part of the meeting, the motions, are probably, in my opinion, I know the Mayor said before the budget's very important. I agree, it's one of the most important decisions we make of the year. But this part of the meeting is probably our most important opportunity to discuss matters that concern the whole borough, and sometimes even to agree unanimously on them. One of my proudest moments on this council in the years that I've been here was on the motion on anti-Semitic agreement to the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which I put forward and was agreed unanimously, and being able to vote in favour of last meeting's motion. And I hope that this one will also be agreed unanimously.
Thank you, Councillor Odds. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I fully welcome this motion. Thank you so much, Councillor Cameron, for all your work on this. I'm really glad you've acknowledged Dr. Sue Mann's work, and I'm delighted that you've acknowledged our own council policy led by Councillor Williams. I will shortly be sending a link round within the next 10 days to everyone to the local reproductive health survey, which will be seeking views on menstruation, menopause and sexual health. And I look forward to circulating that soon. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to welcome the work led by Councillor Williams and officers, but also Councillor Cameron on this. I mean, Councillor Cameron sits on the corporate parenting board, and the same commitment and dedication and that relentless will to ensure that there's a start and finish is the same relentless tenacity you've taken to this piece of work, and I just want to commend that. Mr. Speaker, this is so important and timely. The Mayor spoke a lot about the pandemic today, but when you look at the pandemic, women were at the forefront of responding to the pandemic. So actually, this motion really identified the needs and the adjustments that need to be made and acknowledged within the workplace and beyond. Thank you again.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Councillor Moima.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really welcome this motion as well, and I'm really pleased on your final full council that this is something that you're bringing forward. I had a question for you as the move of the motion, but also perhaps when you look to the communications coming out in the next few weeks, that this is an issue which affects thousands of people across the borough. Perimenopause starts for many people in their 30s. It continues for many people, menopause into their 60s, 70s. I was astounded when you said there was one person in the whole borough. So I'm really pleased that there is work to address that and improve that provision, that coverage. I also would really want to, in our work with the Homerton and other agencies, to make sure that Black and minority ethnic women in particular and disabled women do have the additional access and support that they need in accessing that sexual health support that they simply do not have in relation to their white counterparts across the piece as things stand. And so I would really welcome a recommitment to that in our work around the menopause as well. So, but absolutely 100%, really great work.
Thank you, Councillor Moima. Mayor Glanville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't speak in Labour Group about this, and I just wanted to put on record my full support for the motion and the leadership shown by women in Labour Group, especially in bringing it forward. I'd just like to echo really what Councillor Uma has said. We know that health inequalities are have a real impact in Hackney. We serve a very diverse community. I think points 2 and 3 are absolutely essential. So guidance support in every workplace. And that will be harder where people are in insecure work, in manual occupations. We must make sure we reach them both within the council and beyond. And then we have to have that equity of access, especially through primary care for people that normally struggle to get that access, whether they are from minority ethnic communities or they have learning disability or language challenges. It's a really important motion. This should be treated as a long-term fluctuating condition, as we would treat any fluctuating condition, and that is both in HR and our medical response, and societal response as well.
Thank you, mid-level. Councillor Etty, did you want to say anything before we have the conclusion?
Yes, quick one, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to, thank my colleague, Councillor Cameron. There is no other way to appreciate your support, the fact that we've been colleagues since 2014. And there is no other way to say thank you for all your hard work and your fantastic teamwork and supporting this. Women's health should never be political. And that's exactly what is happening with this menopause motion. I'm not going to say, but menopause knows no color, it knows no race, it knows no gender, it knows no religion, it cuts across all women. We all experience it. However we experience it, it's different experiences. And if you will all agree with me, it cuts across families, it causes problems in various families because they do not understand the hormonal changes happening to the woman in the house. And the man does not understand how to support. So I sincerely welcome what everyone have said. And within the BAME commitment, definitely myself and my colleague, we're taking this further and we will definitely raise the awareness within the borough. Thank you everyone for supporting the motion, and I hope you will support it and taking this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etty. Councillor Cameron, you have 1 minute to sum up if you so wish.
Just fantastic to hear all the support, and I very much take on board the comments from Councillor Murmer about BME communities, and that's something in the work that I've done in this area, that's something that has come through very strongly. Women of colour can have specific medical issues which mean they need additional support, and I think we have to sort of level the playing field because no one is getting the support that they need at the moment. And I was astounded to hear that over and over and over again from colleagues in my workplace, but also as I've begun to talk about it more over the last couple of years, mirroring my personal journey, it's just been the same experience over and over again. So anything we can do to move the dial and to change that experience for women in Hackney would be fantastic. So thank you very much for acknowledging the important issue this is.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cameron. Those in favour of the motion, please show your hands. Any against? That's unanimous. We now come to the end of this meeting and the end of this council term. However, I have a very exciting announcement to make. You are all invited back to the Bridgetown Bar for drinks, which have to be socially distanced. Please join me. Now that the pandemic is somewhat abating, we are allowed to have one last glass of wine. And I'd like to thank all those retiring councillors for the wonderful public service. We heard from Councillor Sharman of so many years of commitment. It's a credit to the community and a credit to you. Thank you. And for those not joining me in the bar, have a safe journey home and have an enjoyable election campaign. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Speaker of the London Borough of Hackney.